It'll be a little, that's right, yeah, let's put it on Carol. I like that idea. Look at that one right there. Very good. So we would like to welcome everyone out tonight. So this is our wrap-up session for our budget workshop. So we appreciate the council being here this evening. Council President Allgood will be here, I think around 7:30. He had a previous engagement with work, so I know he's going to get here as soon as he can on that. So, but we are excited to get through this last part, get some questions answered. Excited to have our new police chief here with us this evening. So welcome, Chief Ingram. It's good to see you. So our what's the word I'm looking for? The agenda, yes, is pretty easy tonight. So we really just have on their fee presentation, use of fund balance, and then wrap up. So we'll start with the fee. We'll start with just a fee presentation. And is that going to be just kind of going through each department one by one? Can I cover them all at once, or what's the?
A little bit.
Okay, so a little bit of both.
A little bit of both, depending on where council wants to take this.
So with that, we're going to turn it over to staff so we can keep eating up here. So.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Tonight is maybe our final budget workshop. I hope it is. We've had some good discussions this past week, and so this will be our wrap-up night. On Tuesday, you were given a handout with Republic Services identifying that we have a fuels rebate that came to the city. So we said, okay, think about how you want to spend that, and we will regroup tonight to define some ideas. So perhaps at the end of the evening, you might have some of your ideas to present to staff so we know a direction how you would like this credit used. I think one of the suggestions on Tuesday was perhaps that berm over at Lions Park so that we can help cut down on some of that freeway noise. So we will come back to this at the end, but I just wanted to remind you of that item that we still need to identify a project for. You have before you tonight, I handed out a handout that says proposed fees with a 5% fee increase. So the way we do fees here at the city, Brent will hand out fees that will pertain to public works. I will give you the fees that are the other city fees that is not a public works tie. So what you have before you are the departments that are proposing either new fees or fees that exceed 5%. This will come before you in a public hearing, but this is your opportunity to look at these fees. Also in the back of the budget book is all departments' fees from this handout that I gave you. So it will have all their fees there in the back of your budget book. Rob, can we pull that up and just kind of click on that so they can see? So fee summary right there. So what you have is the fee summary that you have in front of you, but also behind the summary, a couple pages into it, you will start seeing all the fees for all the departments listed. We did touch on these as the departments did their presentations last week. We had some good questions about are our fees competitive. So some departments are here tonight to come back to you with some comparisons. You had asked for some comparisons to make sure we are aligning with your direction and that we are maintaining some competitiveness with the fees that we're providing. So just to highlight those departments that you will see in the public hearing for increased fees as well as new fees. You have the Caldwell Event Center, and they have, as we talked about, these new RV hookups. So their fees are going where they're proposing an increase to those RV hookups. We now have a new podium, a new projector, and a new screen. So those are new fees that the Caldwell Event Center will now be able to rent out to the public for their events. We're also adding a cleanup fee. And then we have the Holiday Bazaar that is a city event at the event center. So these are the booth fees for that. The city clerk, she did talk to these. She has two increases, one for tree trimmer's license and one for the peddler's license. Fire, the fire chief, is he here tonight? Okay. Fire hasn't had fee increases to any of their fees for a couple years, so the new fire chief came in and just did a fee increase across the board until he can come in and really have the opportunity this next year to look at the fees and make sure we are aligned with our fees. So you will see his fees in here with his increases. Golf, and I have handed out to you a golf comparison. When Brett was here last week, he did talk about the golf course fees, and so he did provide you with a comparison that I've given you tonight, so you can look at those.
Carol, I'd like to talk about golf for just a second.
Mm-hmm.
So, in our other budget presentations, when I asked about a 5% discount for veterans,
Mm-hmm.
I believe your advice was it has to go in front of council. Exactly how do we, does anyone know how we do that or how that comes about? Is that here now or is that something later?
It would be here now. If this is what you would like, need to have him put together, that we would add to your fee sheet for offering that discount to the veterans. And this is for Fairview, or is this for both courses?
Both courses.
Okay, because when this would come before you to approve all city fees, not only do we have the approval process and a public hearing for fee increases and new fees, you will also have the approval process in September for all city fees. So then you would get the whole document that you have here at the back of the budget book, and that's where we would have the discount, and you would then, through that process, it's not a public hearing, it's just, here's all the city fees, because you've already had the public hearing.
How does it get into there? Just it can't be simply by me mentioning it.
You would mention it, and if council is like, yeah, that's a good idea, no, it's not, if I get a nod, some sort of feeling of,
Or at a council meeting. Here?
right now, this is why we're
Are
having
you
the
nodding
workshop.
yes right now?
The only
No.
thing I'm thinking of is,
I won't be there, I'll be in fire negotiations, so I wouldn't even be able to bring that up to them tomorrow. And then their next meeting is too late. I don't think you're on mic, John. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. I think anytime you can give veterans a break on something like this, I think it's a good idea to talk about. I would just want to ask Brett about it and probably the chairman of the golf committee about it and get their thoughts. I mean, off the top of it, I think it's a great idea. In case there's something we're not seeing, we could certainly, if the council decided, we could certainly put it in there for now. I could mention it at the golf meeting tomorrow and just have some discussion about it. And if there's anything negative, I could report it back to the council. If it was positive, I could report the same.
So
I appreciate that.
I think we talked about, having the veterans card approved your veteran or a DD 214. You know, if they say I'm a veteran, they don't get it, as far as I'm concerned.
you mean I couldn't walk up and say I'm a veteran and
Yeah.
could I get a discount, please?
Yeah, because you have to show your card or something to other establishments to get the discount. So I
Absolutely.
think
Yep.
shouldn't be an exception there, so.
Do we want the discount on season passes only? Do we want the discount on the daily fees?
I would say go ahead.
I think it'd be on anything and everything.
Yeah.
You know, the 5%, and then like I said, I think we'd want verbiage in there too about, must show proper ID or sufficient ID, whatever it is, in that regard. So I think the council is in favor of that, again, pending what, Councilor McGee's able to find out tomorrow. So if something came back there, then we can look at that and revisit it, not have it on there. But other than any negative reviews back, which I don't think there will be, but if there are, like I said, it's good to just make sure they may see it different than us.
I'll wait for direction after his
Okay.
meeting tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll just send Carol I'll send you an email or talk to you, and then we can get that back in front of the council.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would think that we're only doing it for passes and fees, not for the pro shop, since this is merchandise and this is tied to inventory that we would have to acquire, as well as the concessions.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Otherwise it gets too cumbersome.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, with the golf course, then we have some annual fee increases to our passes. We have some fee increases to our, purple sage green fees, and then our range fees are increasing as well in the in the golf course. Library fees, Lacey is proposing, a couple increases to her cards, her, resident and non-resident cards. I don't know if, Lacey, did you bring anything, or you want, for a handout or anything, or are you good with what we've got? Okay, thank you. P and Z, we have Jerome here tonight to talk about his fees. So they look like wow. We got some wow moments on those P and Zs, but we have Jerome here tonight that he can address those fees, for you. Then the next department will be recreation. And Denise is here tonight too. She's got some fee comparisons. Just keep in mind, in our recreation department, when Denise does a $5 increase to a event or some sort of class, it looks like it's a huge increase, just because of our fees are low over there in the sense of class size and what it is that we're offering. So, and then I believe those are the only departments that you have before you, that will come before you in a public hearing for increased fees. So with that, I will stand for questions before I turn it over to the departments to individually speak to you on the fees that they have. I think Brent's going to do a presentation as well after we have Jerome and Denise speak to their fees, and then Brent will have his for the enterprise funds and the public works department. Okay, Denise, you want to?
She's over recreation.
Carol, if the question comes up relative to the raises that we gave the employees, is some of this gonna be applied to that? Is that the reason for? Some of it will be, right? Okay.
And I understand that you wanted some comparisons with other recreation departments. With recreation departments, we are always reliant on whatever instructors want to teach. So finding comparative classes was a little bit of a chore. It depends on how long the class is, um, the number of days, the number of minutes, hours, what the pricing is. So I tried to find activities that would be most relevant to this evening. So I know that everybody was interested in the swim lessons, and so we have the format that Caldwell, Nampa, and Meridian offer swim lessons. And as you can see, we are still competitive. Ours are, with the increase, we will be a little more than what Nampa is, but that is what Nampa's current cost is. I don't know what they may increase theirs to. And then our lessons are for 10 days instead of the 8 days. So, and then I also did comparisons on the entry fees to the pools. Ours are a little more in a couple areas, but we also have more availability to the pool. As you can see, that Meridian does not even open their pool on the weekends. And for Nampa, their fees are for just a 2-hour time slot, which you have to schedule ahead of time. So anyone that uses the Caldwell pool, can come between 1 and 4 on weekdays or 7 and 9 p.m. So you could be in there for those 4 hours during the afternoon, or on the weekend, we're open from 1 to 6. So that is the difference there.
Just a quick
Um,
question, maybe just more, so Nampa, do they like empty the pool out every 2 hours of people? Is that kind of it? So you're there 12:30, 2:30, everybody out, and then the next session ends, that,
yes,
wow.
they do. And I think that started with COVID,
Mhm.
but this is the way they do it, and they have a limit of like, I think some of the pools were 150, and so they fill up those time slots, and then you just don't have access to the pool. Um, the next thing that I looked at was preschool and pre-kindergarten. We have just a very small program. We take just 10 students in our classroom, and if it turns out to be a pretty easy bunch of kids, they'll take 12, but that is our maximum. And so our prices, um, for what we offer, I think those are still good prices for the program. It is a little less expensive than what Nampa has. Are there any questions about any of those fees?
Not on the preschool and pre-K, but on some of the others.
Do you? Okay.
So the only question I have really is on the gymnastics. 'Cause I noticed that the resident and non-resident is the same. That's the only one that it is.
The only thing that we offer that is non-resident and resident fees are the swim lessons. Other than that, those fees that I'm showing are the 2022 and then the 2023.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So that
Sorry.
was just, that's
I-
okay. That was with the increase. We have not changed our fees so that non-residents are more expensive, except for the swim lessons.
Why haven't we?
We get a lot of community from Parma, Middleton, Notice, some of these smaller communities. We have not. That is certainly something that we could look at, but that is not anything that has been requested of us.
Well, I think the direction why cities do that is the taxpayers of this city are paying for the
Yes.
pool. And so I think there should be more to be a non-resident and use our pool since you're not paying taxes for it.
Yes, and that was
Something
the
we can change
reason.
Today, or is that something that has to come up later?
Well, for the swim lessons, then that is what we have done. The usually for the pools, the pool prices are the same regardless. To enter the pool would be the same regardless of whether you were a resident or a non-resident at other pools.
But why? That's what I'm saying. So
Oh.
can we change it, meaning, and with the mayor on the gymnastics, if you're using our facilities that our taxpayers pay for, you should pay more to use those, since you're not paying taxes to begin with to have it there.
Oh, for like the gymnastics.
For
Any
anything
of
that
the
doesn't have a
programs?
non-resident attached to it.
So something
I
like
mean,
maybe,
am I off base here? No.
No.
If you don't pay taxes here, then you should pay more to use the facilities here.
And that is something that, if that is what you would like, I can definitely
Even if
make
it's just
changes to that.
Make it easy, just $5 more or something.
yeah, or a 10%, maybe, something like that. So like the 30 gymnastics, for the $30, like a 33 for, because the $5, if you just said $5, if it's a $10 thing, that's a 50% increase.
Yep.
If it's a $50 thing, it's a 10% increase. You know what I mean? So it might be best just to do like a flat 10%. That if you're a resident, this is the fee. If you're non, it's a 10% increase.
For the
on
most part, with other recreation departments, they have like also like member or non-member fees, and we don't have, any memberships. So, it would make it a little more difficult because we would have to find a way so that when people enroll online, that our system would be able to define that they are not a resident of Caldwell,
They
or
don't
they
have to put
are.
their address in online?
We should be able to, but I'm not sure if our software will work that way.
I don't know if the software will distinguish between when you put your address in, oh, you're a non-resident, so I'm gonna charge you the extra dollars. The software, I don't think has that capability to recognize that.
Can you just make it where the non-residents have to pay in person? Or
That,
they can, maybe they can enroll and then
Again,
pay?
it's a software question, though, you'd have to check that box, right?
That, and I think that would create a lot of extra staff time where you'd be defeating
Yeah.
it. So it could be just simple as, you know, are you a resident, check yes or no, rely on their honesty and integrity, hopefully that, you know, when they do check it, that it gives them this rate, if they don't, it gives them the other. And then you could do a simple audit, you know, occasionally, you don't have to go through every single one of them, but if you wanted to go through and, you know, spreadsheet it out and have it calculated, and then just look at a few addresses and see if they're city limits or not, or,
We can follow up with our software company
Yeah.
to see if maybe during the setup process, because they knew we didn't have these non-resident fees, that maybe when they installed the program and set it up, behind the scenes, there's some toggle maybe that can trigger this, that we would be able to then say, yes, now trigger that response. So,
Yeah, if you do
Yeah.
that, there, you can see how this is gonna get complicated pretty quickly.
Yep.
So
Yes.
if you are rural Caldwell, and you're not in the Caldwell city limits, and you input your Caldwell address, I don't know if the software can make that determination as to whether or not you're in the city limits.
it should be able to. I mean, I know, like, for example, the web map that we use, there's software where it'll overlay this year's to last year's, and if it detects a new building that was built, it'll flag it and it'll send the building department. You can set it up for this. Send the building department, say, hey, look, there's a building constructed here, but we don't see a building permit. Go and check it out. So I know there's ways to do it. I'm sure it's just, do we have those capabilities
Yeah, I
and
wonder
getting those in?
With the
Recreation
software upgrade, I wonder if
software.
we're losing more money than we're gaining by.
Yeah.
Well, we
by
may
being-
be, but we don't know without
Mhm.
checking it, and even if you're losing it the first year, you're gaining it in the years after. But in addition to that, maybe if it is too complicated, at least the people that walk in, then you're examining their license, I guess, and determining if they're resident or non-resident. So even if we can't cure it in one full swoop, we can try to collect some fees from
Yeah,
people that are paying attention.
I get it. I get where you're going at. I just, the collection of it and the, I mean, if we're trying to make more money off it, I don't know if we're trying to make more money off it or we're trying to prove a point that we want you to be a city resident or pay more. But I would be interested to see what the software looks like and what the costs are, because we may flip it the other way at some point.
No,
And but I like
good
what,
point.
I like what the mayor said about, you know, we could do it just based on, you know, the integrity of filling out the form. Just check it. Are you or aren't you? I think we probably, I'm looking over at our librarian. I don't know if we check addresses literally or not. So we do that with the library.
Yeah, like I said, even let's say only half the people are honest, you're still getting at least half of an increase from those people that are checking it and doing it, right? So
Yeah.
it'd be a simple thing, and you're gonna at least generate some extra revenue.
If you're you're asking them to be on the merit system.
And then we'll just
right?
return the rest of it over to Chief Ingram to go and follow up on those people and arrest them that are.
He has so many extra
That's
people.
right, exactly.
But-
Exactly.
already not listening.
If it is too much for the software, at least we're getting somewhere, and then if the software's not that much to just check resident or non-resident, then you're relying on your ethics. However, if you get into what the mayor's talking about, I think you might get into a little bit more money. I know when we make a change, we do weigh that out. But I think if we enact it and then just at least at a minimum off your honesty, right?
I'm curious, do we have any idea what percentage of usage is non-resident?
I do not, but I will say this, most of our enrollment is online. So we don't see as many customers as we used to, face to face. It's just easy for them to go online and register. So whatever we do, we're going to have to make it easy for our customers to be able to, you know, go online and do that. I really, looking at the software that we have, and we did purchase a new program just last year, I think that it's going to take a lot of extra work to enable us to separate, you know, any of our citizens and non-citizens.
But other cities have done it.
So here's a question, maybe real quick too. So how do we do it with swim lessons? Is it just they say yes or no?
Yeah, well, they come in. We have not had swim lessons since we got our new software. So we have always done in-person swim lessons, which is a major event.
Mhm.
We look like we're rock stars that morning because we have a line waiting for us 2 hours,
Mhm.
outside the door. And
So will that be
this
going
was
online with the new software?
this new
Mhm.
software, we'll be able to do it online, but we haven't had a swimming
Yeah.
pool, so I don't know how well that's going to
Yeah,
work.
and that is just a check, right? A checkbox, you're not checking addresses, they just say
We,
yes or no.
for the most part, I know a lot of the addresses
Mhm.
anyway, and so if it's something that I'm not sure about, I do usually check them.
On that, but maybe follow up on that. If it's going online, it's most likely gonna go to a check yes or no. I'd love George Strait and I love that song, but probably that's where it's headed for swim lessons. So if that's the case, then it'd probably be pretty easy to implement it for all the others too. And again, just relying on people to check the right box.
And my initial reaction is, of course, we should charge non-residents more because we are paying, but at the same time, how far do we go with that? Because when people come into our city, they're spending dollars in our city. It's the same thing with other activities that we have in the city. We kind of want people coming to Caldwell.
Okay, but so are the people that pay taxes here, they're spending dollars within our city, so I guess the argument can be the same.
Right.
But if they're using wear and tear on our facilities but not paying anything for that use, any more than
Yeah, I'm
citizen
just
already
giving you the
paying
side, because I agree with you, but then I'm thinking, wait a minute, where do we stop that? You know, if they come out for the lights at Christmas time, if they're non-resident, do we want to charge them more? I know we don't charge for the lights, but my point is, we're trying to bring people into our city.
Well, and that would become more of an issue and a bigger dollar amount if we were to charge more for park rentals. Right now, we
Well, I
have,
think that's where cities draw a line, is we don't do lights and we don't do park rentals, but your facilities that they're using.
To me, this deserves a whole probably workshop where we ask you, because I'm thinking of an example of like soccer. So if a Boise team comes in and uses Brothers Field and and a Caldwell team doesn't play, are we charging them an additional fee to play at the field? It's a rhetorical question because I think I know the answer.
No.
So, but I think Brad, Councilman, I think you're onto something. I'd just like to take a more global look at it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And hear more from the director about, hey, where do we do it and where don't we? Because we do have an example on swim lessons when we do, right? And then where don't we? Because I think there's something to be said about using those facilities if you're non-resident, because if you're a resident, you're already paying for part of them.
One question I have is back to the preschool and pre-K. It looks like we actually go more minutes than Napa does, but yet we're substantially cheaper than they are. What's the?
that one, I was a little surprised because we had been fairly close to Nampas for a while. Our facility is probably not as nice as what Nampas is, which I'm not sure if that is, qualifies as being something that we should discount the prices for. Our classes are not overly full, and that's usually an indication when you have a long waiting list that your prices are a little too low, perhaps. But we've had openings continually, just a few openings, and so I feel like we raised the price last year. Are raising it again this year. Maybe we see where we fall this year. Do we have a lot more students? Are there more people on the waiting list before we raise our fees too high?
Because like say with the growth we have, I would think, with the difference in the cost between Caldwell and Napa there, that we could actually, you're raising it, what, $10 from 2022, right?
Yes.
And $8 on the other one.
It was just a 10%,
Yeah.
which is what the mayor requested.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we should probably go back and look at that maybe next year again, because facilities and the shape they're in does make a little bit of difference, I think, but how big of a difference, I'm not sure. It's $55 worth or whatever, but anyway, okay.
Okay, any other questions on any other so if I'm incorrect, if I'm wrong, this interpretation is probably for this year, we're good with this, and then during next year, maybe look at it more in depth with some of those, if we want to start to, and hopefully that that software is maybe in place, we can kind of see how it is, and then see if we want to start divvying out between the two. Does that sound right direction? Okay.
Yeah. And I think like Mr. Doty said, maybe we just have a checkbox and leave it up to the honesty of the customers and see how that works, and if it doesn't, then we can punt next year and do something else.
Lay the hammer down.
I will definitely, take a look at the software and
Okay.
contact the company to see, what options we do have to be able to do that.
Excellent. Okay,
So,
thank you. Oh, yes.
question, so with that being said, do we want to have, brought before you so that we have it in place, non-resident fees then going into fiscal year '23, knowing that we will be working through the process to see if the software can have it, if check the box, if you're gonna walk in the door, so that we start implementing this with the people as they come through? Is that,
I think the mayor's suggesting we research it for the next budget year.
for '24 budget year?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, anything else for Parks and Rec? Okay, thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
then the next one we have, tonight is the, P and Z department. Jerome?
Somebody wake up Mr. Map. He's getting too comfortable back there.
I was just enjoying myself back there. Mayor and Council, before I begin, I just want to say, the planning department, 621, we say thank you.
There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I would say on behalf of the planning department at 621, we thank you. 10%. Okay. Over the last 3 years, we increased our budget 8%. A couple items went up to about 5%. The direction of the mayor requested that we look at 10% of an increase in all the fees. But also what we added was a percentage of time that staff spends on either through our roundtables, phone calls, emails, and writing of staff reports. In June of 2020, staff reviewed our fees as well as time spent, and we used the figure of $25 an hour. It's 2020. I did not change that for this year. And we never used that number to figure out our fees, so this will be the first time. Felt that being it's the first time we've actually increased the fees, that we will leave that dollar amount still at $25 an hour. But like I said, that's not that we're not making money on this. We're not even counting all of our time. Conservative in regards to that dollar amount. As I explained at our a budget meeting. When our office receives a request, usually it's a roundtable request whereby our staff, engineering, fire, planning, and mapping now, together with the applicant, the client, walk them through the process, and we answer questions in regards to their particular application, interpreting the ordinance for them. Sometimes they interpret the ordinance to us, but that opportunity we have is to walk them through the process. That's really only the first time, and they may need to come back for an additional roundtable, or in many cases, as they go through the process of tweeting their application, call staff to assist them in doing so. So the fees that you have before you is that 10%, less than $25 per hour. In particular, I could point out a couple of areas. Special use permits, under 2 acres and then over 2 acres. In 2022, we were charging $700 per application. This year, we're proposing $1,810. It's 158.7% increase. Special use permits in some cases are spend a lot of time working with the applicant in regards to this is what the code says, okay, to meet the code and to be more advantageous in your application. Sample materials, colored elevations, exactly what you're proposing to do. This is not a concept. We used to get concept plans that were coming to our office for special use permit. Basically, any application, sometimes we would get concept plans. Very explicit in regarding to your best product, no matter what your design is going to be. As we did not require material samples, as you know, in this council, you do get drawings of what the proposal is going to look like and an idea of the colors, and at least in the P&Z, having to bring samples and materials. Sometimes they don't have samples, they have photographs. Got a leeway on that. It's a very controversial project. If there's a concern the staff has, we want to. PUDs is another one that probably not charging enough for that, but I'm not willing to push it up higher at this time. A plan unit development is an opportunity for the city to see a creative type of project. It's not a way to circumvent the zoning ordinance or the subdivision ordinance by having smaller lots or to get a product that I use the term questionable. So in a PUD, and we do need to update that ordinance, but a PUD should be creative. It should be a mixture of land uses. So you can have different types of land uses through that process. You need to have 10% open space, which is a minimum, not a maximum. And this process, what we usually get from applicants is the minimum. I think with the PUD, that they would increase the landscaping, they would increase it as part of that application. don't demand it, but one would expect it, because they're getting a reduction usually in, lot sizes, and they're able to probably bill sure than they've had in the past. So, but this number for the PUD is just fine. Plat, final plat and short plat. A short plat is basically a preliminary plat and a final plat all in one. Short plat, we're charging, in the past, $1,235 with $15 per lot. Our proposed schedule for 2023 is $1,889, and we increased the cost per lot from 15 to 20. We didn't feel that was substantial, that we needed to go ahead. Next year, that could be evaluated. I just want to share that we have 2 new fees this year. There's not really a dollar amount that's really the significant fact that it does for our community. Outdoor dining permit is a new fee, $75 last year. Acted this year, we only increased it to $83. The outdoor dining, what we're trying to do is create this ambiance. We have approved the 7th Street, Festival Street, where as you leave the bridge and you're at Arthur looking towards the depot, side is completed, Creekside 20. We have 12 to 15 foot wide sidewalks. Ambiance, city center, and we've got some other areas too, where city center, the public mural and
Jerome, just so you know, if you're using, I'm all for that, if you're using city, again, I hate to keep harping on this, but if you're using taxpayer sidewalks for your private business, then you should pay something for that, so I'm with you.
Our mural and public art, which is, we enacted last year, like it was October. We had a ribbon cutting this past Friday for Rediscovered Bookstore. First large mural, city center. We do have the butterfly next to Extreme Pizza, if you've seen that. This one is really as an example to other artists as well as other businesses to do a outdoor mural and public art piece, which they're doing some public art in that same area.
Jerome, do we have any rules or regulations, for lack of better words, on what type of murals can go up? I'm always concerned about some, off-the-hand group comes in and say, well, gee, you let this guy paint butterflies across Dominion Creek, but we want to, they want to politicize something. I'm always concerned about that because
Yes,
I know
sir.
when you drive through Boise, not that they have their murals are wrong, but I think they have way too many, and I'd hate to see that happen to Caldwell.
We had this conversation when we first started talking about this in 2019. Recognized that, looking at what we've done in the city center, whereby we celebrate Caldwell's history, geologically, archaeology, our buildings that we have in the city center. And if you notice that we discovered a bookstore has Idaho birds and they have Idaho flowers. They have books in their mural. Answer your question very quickly. Is that it has pertained to Idaho and Caldwell. You won't see a freak alley in Caldwell. Hope to do is you asked the question specific. We do have a manual.
Okay.
Of what is expected. We have a selection committee. Self as the director, economic development director, Stephen Jenkins, Sabrina, Stacia Caldwell, and an artist. That's reviewed the particular application.
Mm-hmm. Because, for example, say one of the white supremacist group in northern Idaho would come down and say, we want to paint a mural here, and then you say, well, it doesn't have anything to do with Idaho history, but they say, we've been around for 70 years up there, so why can't we? See what I mean? That's an extraordinary situation, but I'm just,
I think that our criteria could easily say no.
Okay, all right, good.
So I just pointed out a few of the fees, but I think was important. Oh, I'm sorry. Five cities.
So maybe while Jerome is looking at that, to kind of wrap up on his end, I'll just kind of say a few comments. Or did you find it already? Oh, okay, there you go.
Excuse me, I meant to hand that out to you at the beginning.
Thank you.
In April, checked out the different types of five of our neighboring cities. The comparisons are apples to oranges. I try to get as close to our fees. You notice on the first line, and how I did this was that gray areas are those types of fees, such as special use or conditional use permits. Where our fees are compared to Boise and Meridian. They just have one fee sheet, not knowing if there's any other fees from any of them. So I can't guarantee what it shows. Napa's special use permit fees are only $350.
So in other words, what you're saying here, Jerome, then is that the $1,810 would represent all of the services that we have for that particular item, right?
And these are our current fees.
Yeah.
One thing I've learned over the years that usually those from out of state butter a bit when they see our fees, and actually they tell us our fees are lower than many other jurisdictions, especially when they're looking at coming from out of state.
Well, I know my competitor at one time during our political run told me that if we raised them too high, it would be like California, that nobody would come, but I told him that was nonsense, they would come anyhow, but he's on the Planning and Zoning Committee yet, I think, isn't he, Mr. Harmon? Yeah, so, that just doesn't fly, so.
No, and I made a mistake. These are our current proposed fees. See the comparison of those. The, you know, when it comes to fees, it's always a challenge. You know, are you charging too much or too little? I think for the city of Caldwell is that we've charged too little for so long.
Yeah.
It's not really trying to play catch up. It's really trying to make sure that we're covering our costs as best as we can. I would stand for any questions.
Okay. Any other questions on any of the fees proposals?
No, I think Mayor and Drum, it sounds to me like the big picture here, we're just trying to kind of catch up a little bit and get closer to what these other jurisdictions are, and you seem pretty responsible to me, so.
Yeah, and the goal isn't to make money off of it, obviously, it's just to break even, more or less. And I know that historically, the building department has supplemented money to planning and zoning to the tune of around $200,000 a year, so they could break even. So this should help to get them to be able to do that, so. Any other comments or thoughts, or? Okay. Very good, excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Matt.
Great. We have Rob, who's gonna talk about the cemetery fees. While there are no
You've been so low so long. That's
fees in excess
catch-up.
of the 5% or any new fees, but Rob can give you some historical background to the cemetery fees.
And excuse me, I have a meeting tomorrow night, so I'm gonna leave now. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Do we have a handout for cemetery?
Are they in here?
It's in the book on page, well, this isn't.
Thank you.
724. Just the cemetery fees are gonna be very brief. A couple years ago, when Vinton Howell was the Parks Director, he worked closely with the cemetery, and we went through and did a very thorough analysis of the cemetery fees and made some significant changes. There were a lot of things that we were undercharging on. There were things that we were overcharging on. And so a couple years ago, we went through and cleaned everything up and neutralized it. Since then, we have just taken a regular increase every year. I felt like this year was no different, being that with where inflation is and things. And so we kept an increase across the board. There's no increase that exceeds 5%. As part of this, I did reach out to, I had a staff member reach out to Hillcrest. Yeah, Hillcrest Cemetery, just to get just on the lot, a typical lot purchase, just to see kind of if we're in the ballpark there. And so what I came to is, if you're looking at Canyon Hill, we have two different types of lots for adults. We have the ones that have the view and the ones that are just regular lots. And what you're paying is you're paying this fee here, and then you're also paying the perpetual care fee, which goes into the perpetual care fund. And I found that was similar to Hillcrest. Hillcrest for a regular cemetery plot was about $13.75, and so we are a little bit under that, depending on which type of lot you want to purchase. But we felt, it's kind of in the ballpark there. Some of these other items, these were some of the items that we had to make significant corrections on a couple years ago, because we found that the cemetery was helping fund some of these rocks and monuments that people were purchasing, and we didn't want it to be that way. We wanted that to be completely on the purchaser. And then we have some fees for Saturday events. Typically, because we don't have staff that normally work Saturday because of our small staffing size, we have to pay extra to have staff come on Saturdays and do the Saturday events. And That is basically it for the cemetery. I don't know if there are any questions on what we're doing there.
Rob, do you know the reason why we shared the cost of monuments? Is there something in the,
It wasn't that we were sharing, it was because the cost had been established a long time ago, the price to purchase a monument.
yeah?
And then as the monument prices, the cost of the material increased, our
Oh,
fees
we-
never changed. And
I
so
see.
we found out that the city was actually subsidizing that, and we didn't, that's why we made that big correction a couple of years ago to get everything back into balance so that people purchasing are purchasing the whole monument and the city's not subsidizing that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on that? Okay. So what's up next? Which one of your 35 departments are we looking at right now? Okay.
Brent's fee himself is going to increase.
Just want to echo Jerome. We've had a lot of expressions of appreciation for the council's action last night. Thank you so much. What I want to do here, this handout just has a few of the kind of big items that the council asked questions about at the budget workshop last week. So I want to hit those, and then I'll give you a few comparisons between other cities. But I think this is the meaty stuff that we really need the council's feedback on. First of all, sanitation, we got, I think, pretty clear direction from the council that you'd like us to seek a extension of the contract, which is permissible under our contract in 10-year increments. And of course, Republic Services sent the council a request, and it just noted some of the things that they do, and they have been good to work with. They have been good to work with. But here you see their proposed rates. We have industrial, commercial rates as well, and I can give you the whole rate schedule. And if you would like that, let me know. In the absence of that, I just wanted to show you this as a bite of what's it costing our average citizen in Caldwell. And so here you see their rate costs. They did propose to us, and we looked at them a little bit in the budget workshop and can pull them up now too. A few other things like it does cut the recycling cost in half. If we say, look, we're not going to make this an optional subscription-based thing, it is right now. If we said, no, we want to make this everybody does recycling, it's just part of the game. Everyone gets a recycling cart, and everyone has to pay for it. Then it takes the cost of that recycling from $7.58 down to like $3 and change, whatever half of that is. So it's essentially half. And then there are a few other options that they're proposing, and I think some of these are related to the new contract proposal. And so Republic Services is a little sensitive about that because they have contracts with a number of other cities, and if they're giving us a better price, they don't want their other customers feeling bent out of shape about that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be public record, but and frankly is now because we have it. So, but they have a few ideas about maybe smaller carts. You see the little mini carts if someone does that, and I think that could be especially relevant if the council is like, hey, we really do want to pursue everyone recycling, then that means a lot of people may be able to do it in a smaller cart because they would have a place to put possibly some of the bulky items. Cardboard's huge, right? Put that in the recycling cart, and then you may need less space for trash. So if the council has interest in moving that direction, and we don't have to make that decision now, but we do need to, by the time we adopt the fees in September, we need to know if we want to say, hey, we're just going to require recycling across the board. Republic Services will help us with the public relations and marketing of that action. And then they also proposed a veterans discount, which is identical to the senior citizen discount. That's something else they could offer. because there's I feel like this is getting mired up a little bit with the idea of a request for contract extension. I would like to kind of dig into that with Republic and make sure that it's not, hey, this is meant to induce, or to encourage the council to consider us for a contract extension. I want to make sure that we're differentiating between what that is and if we kept them only until July of 2023 when their contract is up. So I can give you a clear answer, because I don't know how much of that is tied together in their minds at this moment.
Yeah, Brent, I'd just like to make a comment on the recycling thing. We've tried it for years and it just never worked. I mean, we were subsidizing that whole program, and I don't think in my opinion only, I don't think we need to force that onto the taxpayers, because even what we had, we finally quit it, and then what little bit we had, we sent over to the recycling place, and, it's free there.
Yeah.
You go past it anyhow.
Right.
Once a week, so I really don't think in my opinion, I don't think we need to force that on the taxpayers, so what everybody else thinks, that's fine, but my opinion based on the experience I had with it.
Yeah, I'm with you. It reminds me of a story I heard back in the olden days when when the garbage man stopped in Seattle at someone who was frantically trying to sort their recyclables. He's like, hey, forget about it, we throw it all away anyway.
Yeah.
That isn't happening with Republic though. And here is a possible trade-off. I can't tell you how the numbers would shake out, but Republic does return part of the recycling. We get a proportion of the recycling commodity price back. So when people recycle in Caldwell, it does help bring some value back to us. We get a proportion of it, and Republic gets a portion of it. So if everyone recycled, then it would be a cost benefit to the sanitation program in general, but you never know if they will. There is also some challenges with recycling errors, right? People take water bottles like these. They're recyclable theoretically, but they're not recyclable literally in mixed recycling, because they're sorted by machines, and the machines, they end up flattened out like paper, and they end up with the paper recycling and goof up the recycling machine. So that's why you may hear Republic talk about the Hulk test. If you can smash it like Hulk, then it can't be recycled, even though it's polyester. But
that's one of the problems we had. If you bought a case of water from Costco, you can't recycle it. You bought it from the Albertsons, you can, but you got to take the paper off of it around it.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. It's ridiculous. So.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the sanitation. But what you have presented here on the handout is just strictly the sanitation based on the contract allowed rate increase that relies on the CPI. So right now we have them limited to a 4.95% increase on the contract, which is great, right? That means even if the market goes up in that more than that, that's all the citizens will see. So now moving on to the airport, we talked a little bit about airport fees. We proposed.
Did you get a direction on recycling or not?
No. I mean, I guess not. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I think, and I would concur with Counselor Stoddard on that. And I don't know if anybody else has a differing opinion, but yeah, I don't think we should force it, because I was kind of the similar boat. I had it, and then I got tired of not this, not that, so I was like, it's just all going in the garbage. So that would, I think, be the direction that we probably. I see a lot of head nods.
Okay, that sounds
Counselor
good.
McGee, he may have a different opinion.
No, I have the exact same opinion. I mean, my kids are always looking at what I'm bringing to the garbage, what I'm bringing to the recycling, and they're always criticizing me so
Don't make it personal.
I'm fine with this. Fine with this. I might also mention, that was Councilman Allgood. He's running a little bit late, so to tell you.
And then I guess the one last question is, on the veterans discount idea, I really believe that, as I've read through their documents, I believe that their mentality is that's something they would offer to us as an encouragement for us to consider a contract renewal with them. So I want to make sure that I understand that well before we put that before the city council. But I know that there's interest in a veterans discount, and there already is a senior citizens discount. So their proposal would be to make it the same for veterans and senior citizens. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Airport. So this is a little complex, and we've talked about this problem a little in the past. But for a quick summary, the airport's been in its current location for about 30 years. Well, I guess about 40 years now. Established there in 73, I believe. So I guess coming in on 50 years almost. That's I still feel youthful, and I'm sorry. It's been a few years since came up with a 30-year number. So we have some old legacy leases, we'll call them. Back in the day, leases were established with the airport tenants for the space under their hangar at one rate, and for space they wanted to control outside of their hangar at another rate, the uncovered rate. And they often established leases for really long periods of time, which the FAA has now said, look, you're basically, if you lease something to somebody for 80 years, you're selling them the property or giving them the property, and that's not okay for funds that are obligated with these airport improvement program funds. So, we've got a good standard lease that complies with all the FAA's requirements. It's 20 years, and it can be renewed if the tenant's in good standing. The current standard lease requires that the lease rates just synchronize with the city council's adopted fee structure, which is the way it should be. The whole idea of fees, right, is to cover the cost of providing the service. And what has occurred at the airport with these legacy leases is they are set in their own lease. It wasn't standardized, and it said, oh, it's going to grow by the CPI, and some of them say stuff like, you can only take an increase on this rate every 7 years. I mean, it's a lot of disadvantageous things towards the city and, frankly, then the citizens, because we're just a thin layer of, you reach into our wallet, you're reaching into the citizen's wallet. So the standard lease, it was standardized in 2010. Unfortunately, it was still doing this CPI thing. Councilman Stoddard and I were talking about this, and we're like, look, if I take out a lease on a hangar, I buy the hangar, and I put it on the city's property at the airport and take out a lease in January, then I'm going to get the wintertime CPI. And Councilman Stoddard, maybe is July, and construction market's hot. So he's potentially getting a less advantageous rate increase every time. So there's some injustice and inequity amongst these legacy lease rate holders because their leases are whenever they entered, the anniversary date, whether it's January, February, that's when their lease typically said that the CPI would be checked. So that's an inequity that's just dumb. Besides, it's a huge burden on the staff. They've got to go through the lease and, oh, what month was it? Oh, we got to watch the CPI for that month for this particular lease so we can do their billing. Oh, now we got to do the next. Anyway, you get the point that it's messy and challenging for no good reason. So what you have here is a summary of there are 558,000 square feet of covered legacy leases. And so if we average all the rates together, that's about 18 cents per square foot per year. And then the uncovered rate is at an average of 7 cents per square foot per year, and there's 183,581 square feet of property that's being leased for that. So I've given you some examples of what it could look like and some assumptions that go into that. Under a new lease, we're proposing a lease rate increase to 42 cents, which is an enormous increase. It's an 86% increase in that number. That's the current rate is 22 and 7/10 cents per square foot per year, and so if it went up to 42, you can see that large difference. For a basis of comparison, Nampa's rates for new leases is 31 and 1/10 cents as of last year, so they'll probably make a change to that this year. Of course, their new rates aren't available yet. We have a policy that says, hey, anytime a lease changes hands, they have to enter into the new lease. When we bring an ordinance modification before you for the airport, there's a few things pending there. One, the possible change of the airport commission to align with the approach on boards and commissions to quarterly. Whether or not that passes is not. I'm okay either way. I think that's meant with the mentality of saving staff time. There's one that was continued last night. That one is to allow us to do a deferral for sewer and water connections for a hangar that just has no reasonable access to those services. So they're not spending $200,000 to bring sewer and water to a hangar that they're going to flush the toilet in twice a week. And so there's a modification proposed there. We have also proposed to add ordinance modification that would strengthen this idea that the lease changes over. You can't sell your corporation name that has one asset, and that's the hangar, to Joe Blow and have him inherit your legacy lease. Not allowed. And so there's an ordinance modification proposed to stop that from happening so we can get these guys off of this and onto the one that where the city council has control of charging a fee that pays for the service. So, and most of our tenants at the airport, 90% of our tenants at the airport, they are legitimate hangar owners. We don't own hangars except for the one that we'll actually be asking for your permission to sell here soon, based on a recommendation from the airport commission. But only 90% of them are from other areas. So, so we don't want to subsidize them. And as Councilman Sadek has said at Airport Commission in his role there, we don't want to play Santa Claus. Santa Claus be Santa Claus.
Thank you. Sorry for the redundancy.
My fault. So if you turn the page on that handout, when all the leases were converted over, presently, based on the leases that are currently tied to the city council's rate structure, it would bring in about 21,000 and change this year, this fiscal year 2023, and that's with no additional land leased or anything like that, just holding things equal. If all of the legacy leases were converted, then that would bring in a revenue of 492,739. That assumes no additional lease added. It also assumes that the uncovered space that people are controlling because they want control of it, but their hangar doesn't cover it, that they would retain all that. It is possible, of course, that someone would say, man, if you're going to raise the rate, I don't need to control this space next to my hangar, so I'm dumping that. And then that would diminish the return somewhat. The operation and maintenance cost at the airport for 2023 is $535,466. There's $177,920 coming in property taxes. That leaves a difference of $357. My goal, I would like to establish a fund balance. The fund balance in the airports we project is going to be about $80,000, maybe up to $83,000 at the end of this fiscal year 22, going into fiscal year 2023. I'd like to have a fund balance that's up there high enough that when we're cash flowing these big projects, right now finance is scrambling when we're paying invoice number 1 to Central Paving for rebuilding Taxiway Alpha, right? And so if they put in a draw request against a project, even though it's federally funded, we've got to cash flow all that because it's all reimbursement based. And it's uncomfortable for the airport's expenses to have to be cash flowed by other funds in the city, and then until we get reimbursement from FAA, which we request them quickly, but it could be a 30-day turnaround. We could be cash flowing that for several days. We really would like to get the fund balance in the airport where the airport can take care of its own problems that way and not be relying on shifting money around and you know, unexpected expense in some other budget while or fund while we're getting reimbursement. Impact of the fee increase. Okay, and then there will be growth that will help that fee. It also comes with proportional increase in costs. The more surfaces we maintain, of course, the more match we have to pay, et cetera. So that's the kind of scene. If I'm making you uncomfortable with that kind of an increase, let me know. But you can see Nampa's is 31 as of last year, probably go up a few cents if they stick to their trends. They were 27 cents before and they went up to 31. We've grown way slower. We've been very cautious about not having our fees exceed any of our neighbors. And what really, as we do the calculations, we just want to get where the fee is going to cover the cost to provide the service. So that's the airport. Any guidance or corrections or questions on that?
I'd just like to address Mr. Mayor. You know, this whole situation at the airport was a lot like the golf course was 5 years ago, that all the taxpayers were subsidizing for the fund that the few were having. And I impressed upon Brent and Rob and the rest of them and the board that we just can't do business like this anymore and expect all the taxpayers to subsidize somebody else's fund, you know, as far as flying airplanes and everything. So that's why we're trying to shore this whole thing up. And I still would like to see a balance sheet at our next meeting so they realize what this deficit is, because we've never done that before either. So they don't know, you know, what the deficit is. They think maybe we're making money or something, so we need to do that. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the more information, the better.
Hey, Brent, go along with kind of the theme of the night, would we be able to have a resident versus a non-resident lease at the airport?
That's a great question.
2024.
My
Good
first
thing to
thought
talk about,
is,
though, isn't it?
I don't know of any problem with that from I think that's
FFA.
possible. That might be one we want to run through with the attorneys, because the FAA is particular, and there are a lot of pickety rules from the federal government on it.
Maybe some state aeronautics issues as well.
Possible. So that's one we definitely want to vet with the attorney's office and the FAA probably before we committed to, yeah.
What are you thinking now?
Well, the Doty committee will examine. We could charge them with examining that idea. And then Brent. Although, I mean, I think about, in all honesty, I think about the presentation that Rob made, and you look at the numbers of people who live in Caldwell versus the number of people who don't live in Caldwell that use the airport. To Councilman Stoddick's point, we're subsidizing a lot of that, and it's just, it's a conversation we should continue to have. And then one last one, if you don't mind, Mayor. Brent, you talked about the fund balance and how important it was in the airport in order to keep those projects going, right?
Yeah, and
I just want to make sure I fully understood that.
you're exactly right. So, example, last year we rebuilt Taxiway A, or Alpha, if you want to use the NATO airport speak. And so we have draw requests. It's an expensive program, $2 million project. And happily, because of COVID and whatever else that Congress was working on, they granted that at 100%, which is unheard of. It's usually we have to pay 10% of the cost, or less the 2.5% that the State Division of Aeronautics usually helps us with. So 7.5%, I guess. That allowed us to do some improvements that were important to keep businesses operating on the airport while that construction was happening. That was the extension of Taxiway C. But let's say that that's a $2 million project, and they perform a quarter of it, $500,000 of it, and then they send us a draw request, and I think it's usually in smaller bites. Carol could actually speak to that, and Rochelle probably, but they come to us with a $500,000 draw request on that project, and the airport has a pretty small fund balance. We're going to be sub $90,000 at the start of the fiscal year. I mean, where is Carol supposed to take that money from to pay this bill and then hang out while Tammy frantically gets the data from the contractor and our airport engineer and files it with the FAA's reimbursement system and then waits for the FAA to reimburse us? So that's the thing that's a little bit uncomfortable about it. There's other reasons that I think a fund balance is important. If you need to do some little improvement or fix the storm drainage, or to have the flexibility to do any project, you need a little bit of a fund balance available there. But that's probably the most compelling element of the fund balance need.
All right, thank you.
Questions? Yeah. How much do you think the hangars will go for, and how many, we only have one hangar?
So that hangar is the one that Urban Renewal purchased on behalf of the city for the Treasure Valley Community College Airframe and Power Plant Mechanics School. And then they were just like short one grant, and it didn't come to fruition, and they notified us officially that program is not going to happen. And so that hangar, we talked with the airport commission about, do we use it for transient jets and like lease it on a nightly basis, Airbnb for airplanes or what? But that's Airbnb, that's kind of cool. But really, airport management and the airport commission felt like it's best for us this is a great time to sell. We would put it out the airport commission recommended that we put it out, declare it surplus, which we're required by law to do, and then put it to auction. And there's a great auction service that's really experienced with these, and we've engaged them already to kind of feel out what that would look like, and so they probably can bring us a pretty good price for that. I'm going to make a guess that we could probably bring at least $350,000, maybe $400,000. Know that there are some building code deficiencies on that hangar that are going to diminish the end profit that we could make on it, but that'll be a little bit of a bolus to and it might kind of give us some instant fund balance there.
That's what I was going for, so it could go into the fund balance to start it off anyway.
Yeah.
Or to get it whole, or.
Yeah, that would help a lot. Um, Took kind of a major hit to that fund balance. We had about a $380,000 fund balance um, several years ago, and the FAA agreed that they would pay for the taxi lanes, the last taxi lanes that the city actually built at city expense, which we don't think that's even possible anymore. I don't think we'll ever be seeking to do that again. We could have done it for a lot less, but the FAA said they'd pay for it, so we went through all the federal strings, designed it to federal standards, and there's lots of extra expenses, you know. It's probably 50 cents. Your dollar is worth 50 cents in that arena, really. And then they pulled the plug on us after we'd already bid it out, and it was like, we can't go back. And so that soaked about $300,000 of that fund balance out. So.
Okay, what's up next?
Okay, up next, sewer. So just one thing I wanted to point out on sewer, and I'll show you some comparable rates for sewer and water. If you don't mind, I'll do that after we go through a couple of these important items. The council examined a request for a design contract on the shop expansion several weeks ago, and we talked about how the cost of construction, something that in yesteryear we were paying $50 a square foot for shop space, is now $400 a square foot. Construction costs are not all completely uniformly, that's an eightfold increase. They're not all completely uniformly eightfold increase, but we had a capital improvement plan. We have 30 years worth of projects were required by the EPA and then the DEQ, of course, to maintain these capital improvement plans. They call them a facilities plan, and we update it every few years. We had this all lined out with the rate increases and current construction costs so that we were going to be able to keep paying for these projects little by little and just stay on top of it all the way through that 30-year period. These construction costs have annihilated that, unfortunately. And so we've kind of consistently, that was with a consistent rate increase of about 4.9% and about a 3.6% growth rate, because more customers means a little bit more revenue too, right? So I've gone through the budget, the out-year budget. It's not official. It's the projected budget for the next 5 years, and doubled the cost of those construction projects, which I hope is enough, and it may not be. I just don't want to be stupid about it, right? I don't want to be excessive, but and so we'll hopefully be able to use that to help inform us on what do we need to do going forward so that we don't go negative in the sewer fund, which is a crazy thought because sewer fund it's critical. You've seen a number of emergency projects over the past several weeks, months. You just have to have you have to have the capability to respond to emergencies in the sewer fund. So we don't want to get on a trend where you've got a constant declining fund balance there, and we're not right now. But as we do these projects at an increased cost, I'm not 100% sure where we'll stand anymore.
Mr. Mayor, the only comment I want to make there, we always have to make sure that we're up on these contingency funds too, because in my prior life in the potato industry, we built storages almost every year, and they were anywhere from $1.3 million to $2.5 million. And the minimum we had on there was a 10% contingency fund. In those days, we didn't have the growth like we did, but at least it covered it, and we could always refund whatever it did. So we really need to make sure, as we discussed before, those contingency amounts are enough. Even if we're a little bit over, I'd rather be that way than way under. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then water, basically the same issue for water, and I won't harp on it, and I don't want to consume the council's time any more than I already have. But just plastic prices are, of course, relative to fuel prices or crude oil prices. And so right now we're seeing prices are pretty wild in plastic, and availability is very sparse, unfortunately. So we've got a big water main extension project that is ARPA project, happily, but it just, the higher those costs go, the less work we can actually accomplish with the money. Council Register, I thought I saw a question in your eyes. Am I right?
Moving my mic down.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay. Irrigation fees, just a note that irrigation fees under Idaho code are to be set in January. So no So we have to propose those rate increases in January under Idaho statute, Title 50. And then finally, for the details here, the streetlight fund, we talked a little bit about moving the city electricians from the street department into streetlights. They do all of the work that's done for streetlights, and then they also work on traffic lights and then electrical work for the other departments in the city. We'd move them there, but their personnel funding would still be in the street department this year because we just, it's too late to really try to make changes there. There could be a slight expense to converting one of the electrician positions to a superintendent position there. But that is something I believe we can do within budget. And then we would probably change the name of that department to the city electrical department because they'll have multiple functions. So with that, it is possible that we'll see, we'll evaluate as we go along. We may see the need to add more electricians, but that's we pay a lot of money to outside electricians, and we appreciate their great work and everything, right? But we could save a lot of money by doing more of that work ourselves. And lately, with how busy things have been, we've had to turn a lot of work that we could have had the city electricians do away. And that will, I believe, handily pay for itself. So it would be probably a no net cost increase. So just I wanted to make you aware that we may be coming to you to ask for that. And then, of course, we talked about apprentice certification.
Okay. Did you or did you not ask for electricians in your budget more?
Did not ask for a new electrician position.
How
Not
much
that
are
I
we
can remember
paying
anyway.
roughly, Carol, for hiring out electricians? Idea?
Yeah, so right now we're paying $28 for an absolutely superb journeyman electrician who is who I hope will apply for the superintendent position. And we just lost an apprentice who is just outstanding, unfortunately. He went to ACHD and got a good pay increase. The 10% is going to help a lot. And then we also need to get that apprentice program in. For now, we're going to try to replace that apprentice with journeyman, just because we can't start from ground zero again. We got to hit the ground running with all the work we've got to do. So, does that answer your question, or am I missing the boat?
Well, I just wanted to do an analysis of how much we're paying out versus if we were to add someone to your personnel right now, like in this budget. But if one person can't be in 5 places either, if you have 5 people out that we've hired out.
I could put an analysis together for the council and send that over to you. The way I would probably think is the best to approach it is take what does it cost us, hourly or by job for electrical work done by our outside contractors, and then just try to compare that to full-time equivalents with the kind of wages we're.
Plus benefits, plus everything.
Yes, loaded rates, yeah. Mm-hmm. I could.
Not this year, at least for next year. I mean, if we're paying hundreds of thousands out, we might as well hire another person, right?
Yeah, and I think what I've kind of got here is the idea that we may I wanted to give the council a heads up that we might come to you and say, hey, we think this is a net zero cost increase, but it's still an appropriation and it's still a mid-budget thing. If you approve this budget and we move on, and then I come to you and say, pretty please, can we have a couple more electricians?
Okay.
But I'll endeavor to show you if we do that it's going to be cost neutral to the city.
Thank you.
Okay. And next, let's see, or is that all?
That's it on fees.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, okay, so,
Okay,
yeah, you wish. So is that it for fees for everybody?
it is, unless council has any more questions or directions for.
Could we maybe start over so we can refresh it for Council President Olga that just got here? I'd appreciate that. Yes, sir.
For pointing out he hasn't had a chance to. And
I still have to do engineering, but those will be very, very quick. And I apologize, I don't have a handout for this, but I can certainly email out our spreadsheet here for the engineering. Just real quick, this includes fees for plats, preliminary plat review, final plat review, SUPs, and then right-of-way permits was kind of a big one that we dealt with a couple years ago. Similar to the cemetery, we did go through a couple years ago and we made some significant increases because we had tracked the man hours to go through and do some plan review. So you'll see in 2019 here, we were only charging $104 for preliminary plat, plus $10 a lot. And then that jumped up after we actually went through and analyzed how many man hours it really takes to do that. We corrected that. And then this year, that stayed the same for a couple of years. And then this year, we're proposing still an increase that's less than 5%, just to keep up with the inflation. And then the other significant note is a couple of years ago, we had right-of-way permit fees that were extremely low. And the penalty for a contractor to go cut across Ustick Road, for example, without a permit was $140. And so they would do that all day long because that's cheaper for them than going and taking the time to get a permit. So we made some big increases there last year in 2021 to make sure that if they're working in the road, there's a different fee for if they're working on the sidewalk, and then the penalties were raised to $1,000. And so we're adding a percentage that's less than 5% to all of those as just across the board for engineering. In the next year or two, we will go through and reanalyze where we're at and then make adjustments accordingly.
And then, Mr. Mayor, beg your pardon.
Yeah, go
I
right
did
ahead.
want to just give the council a very quick exposure to comparable rates. We looked at that for Nampa. Is that okay?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, just real quickly, I'll just give you Nampa, Meridian, and Boise. Sewer rates, if we took a 4.9% increase this year, sewer rate for the average user, which is somebody who's using 800 cubic feet of water in a month, would be $37.67. Nampa's under last year's fee resolution is $62.25, and Meridian's is $45.55. Boise's is $51.24 for that same user. And the rate structures are different, so the only way to compare these is to pick out that number and say an average user in Caldwell is using about 800. And so that's why we use that number and how we make those comparisons. And then for water, a 4.9% increase would bring about an average user cost of $18.03 in Caldwell. Nampa's under last year's fee resolution is $27.64 for the same water usage. Meridian's $16.85. And then Boise, of course, has United Water, and I haven't been able to penetrate the Veolia website enough to get their numbers, so I don't have that for you. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Anything else or comments or questions on any of the fees? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about fund balance. So that gives Council President Allgood a chance to maybe go get some food if there's any left. Oh.
But there's all kinds of goodies
Okay.
back there.
Are we adding the third one to IT now?
Yeah, a hacker.
Yeah, tell him, we'll take them.
Like he doesn't have enough to do. Right. Now he's hacking into.
So have you had a conversation with Rex yet about some recommendations on who might
We
be
didn't,
the
I just wanna
captain
know.
as far as conduit and all that between the old and the new? Like Mr.
I
Wright
just
or-
didn't see it on a
Well,
spreadsheet tonight.
So I know
I
talked
think he
to
should create
Lenny
two
today, but I
captains,
thought Ferry
in
was
my
going
opinion.
to, but I
I
remember
think there
Nicky
should be
said
an
that. I
administrative
mentioned to Brett about
captain
you know,
and an operations
board,
captain.
So what's the
and he
difference?
said he would recommend not.
Well, administrative deals with employees and operations deals with all the radio cards, computers, et cetera. I think Dave would be great as an operations captain, doing all that stuff, you know?
And we do have some new netting in places, which is great.
So that's my opinion, but I don't know what he's gonna do. And I thought that,
Cause we can sure make some recommendations to him. I mean, I would like to make sure that somehow Mr. Wright's included in one of those positions as captain, cause he isn't that hard to go into. Because of what he's done, you know. And he knows.
Brent, can you drive? Can you go to the budget book and go to all funds?
Secret. For a moment.
Way back on, Roberto? Perfect, excellent, okay. Very good, so we took a short break, and we're back, so we just got done discussing the proposed fees, and all the questions were answered. So our last item to discuss this evening, is in regards to fund balance. And so, I'll kind of kick it off, kind of give some discussion, and then I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of discussion on it, and I welcome that and look forward to the council, because it's obviously your decision on what we do with fund balance and if we utilize any of that or where that's at or the amounts that you want in there. So I'm just giving thoughts and ideas that I've had and then look forward to your comments and the direction that you give to myself and to staff before we go from here. So maybe we'll just start off with, Brent. And actually, Brent, do you want to maybe go over that? Did you give the sheet out?
I did, Mayor.
Oh, okay.
So last page of the all funds city budget book. Go up a few pages. That's a different, that will be leading into the mayor's discussion.
I think that's Indian Creek.
Beautiful picture. Okay. And then the last page of this report, so it's a long one. There we go. So what I've handed out to you for discussion is this is all the city funds in the draft form. We still have a few more changes we have to make. So staff is working on the positions that we discussed last week. So we are now working in the process of adding these positions into this book here. This book does contain those raises that were approved on Monday night, so the 10% and the step adjustments. This does also contain a proposed 2% adjustment for performance evaluations effective in October. And we're still in negotiations with the fire department, so those adjustments for whatever the final is on them is not in here yet. So what we're showing here in the proposed column for fiscal year 23 is the use of $19,406,266 of fund balance. So I went and said, what funds are using the fund balance at this time? So I've given you a handout here that shows the three highest funds that are using their fund balance. We got the sewer fund for $12.5 million. We have the water fund at almost $5 million used as their fund balance. And then the street department is proposing a $2.8 million fund balance. You take those three netted against that $19 million, and now we have some excess of, $956,000. But that's only three funds. So the rest of the funds that are in this budget book are feathering this $956,000. So some are using fund balance, like Brent talked about, his airport. They're going to use $30,000. I didn't put this on here for presentation because it's $30,000. And some funds are balanced. Others will be balanced that are not balanced in this budget book because we were waiting for the approval to put those positions in here so that we can bring that. So this number could increase once we get those funds, the positions added to this number. Because some of the departments, for example, like engineering, they have almost $600,000 that they're showing in excess revenues. Well, that's because they proposed and asked for 4 or 5 positions. I don't remember, was it 4 or 5, Rob? 4. So they took into account when they prepared their budget that says, we're asking for these positions, we're showing how we can take on the capacity of it. So when I get those positions added here, this number is now going to go up to $20 million use of fund balance because we're showing that we have the capacity to add that. So that's what I've handed out to you tonight, is just saying these are the big departments that are using it, and that's where they're coming from. If there's questions on these projects, these are one and done projects that's an appropriate use of fund balance. So, for example, Brent, 2 of them are enterprise funds, the other one is a special revenue fund with the street department. So he's got a proposal of $2.8 million to use out of his $7 million fund balance, I think, for his fund balance. So with that, I will stand for questions. Oh, and Councilman Static, one of the things you did identify was contingency. And in the general fund, just in the general fund, we have had a $500,000 contingency in the general fund. The mayor has requested that we reduce that contingency to $100,000. So we now, that's again where we have gained $400,000 in capacity, is the contingency has been reduced down to $100,000 from $500,000.
Is that in that 956,000 number?
Like I said, once we start getting these positions in, we're going to feather with the rest of these smaller departments. No, they're not smaller, with the rest of these departments.
So, Carol, the contingency is 500 that will go to 100. What does that contingency for what? Is that particular, does that cover particular?
So I will use the example of the runoff election that we had. Was it last year, Debbie, or 2 years ago? Last year. Sorry.
What year was that?
Yeah. Sorry. It's a little the horns or the wings speaking. We had in the budget, she had in her budget, 30,000, Debbie, for the election. We got the actual bill from the county, and it came in at $48,000 more than her $30,000 budget. So we came to council and said, there's no way Debbie's budget can handle 48,000, so we requested to use 48,000 of contingency to pay for that. So that's where you would have your contingency used in situations like that.
By the way, I chastised Mr. Yamamoto over that number too, personally, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I mean, being that far off, I couldn't understand why, so.
So that is a prime example of how that contingency would be used. So with $100,000, a $48,000 bill, you just use half of your contingency on something like that.
So, Mr. Orby, when we had Snowmageddon and we paid our street department for 21 days straight, plus hired private contractors, does the street department have a contingency for that kind of?
No, we didn't have a budgeted contingency item of that size. We had a contingency item. We've typically asked the council to approve a budget for a $200,000 contingency in street, just so that we don't have a huge budget number that we're never using. And the snow removal budget that we typically carry is $15,000, and it's usually adequate. People asked us, "Are you going to increase the snow removal budget next year?" And we're like, "Well, we're going to watch the Farmer's Almanac and stuff and see what the projections are." But it just looked like it just didn't make sense. We don't want to carry a big budget number that we don't think is going to get used.
Do you remember how hard a hit that was? How big was that when we were done?
Yeah, we spent, of that $15,000 budget, we spent $850,000 or something like that.
Oh, we went over just a little bit.
So that hit the fund balance,
Yeah.
because it's way more than the contingency.
Yeah, and I was just curious, because that was one of those events where it was just declared an emergency, and we did all kinds of gymnastics. But yeah, thank you.
And forgive me, don't quote me on the number, because that's my recollection, but I ain't too smart.
I believe, Councilman Alga, I believe also that year with Snowmageddon, City Hall used some of the not fund balance, City Hall used some of the contingency funds, because we had some serious roof issues. So we did use contingency funds to fix those roofs. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. So I'm just gonna kind of jump in. Like I said, kind of go over a few of these things, and like I said, I'm sure there'll be lots of discussion on that. So, look forward to that and kind of your thoughts, things like that. So, fund balance. So that's been I think a pretty hot topic of discussion, looking at that. And so, you know, my goal is, we have a lot of different categories of fund balance. And so my goal is to kind of try to consolidate. There's some that we can't, that have to be out there. But I'd like to see some of them consolidated, just to provide, I think it's more transparent that way, rather than having multiple different accounts out there, trying to figure out how much of a fund balance do we really have. When you're adding up 10 or 11 different accounts, you know, it starts to add up. And so I just kind of went through, and these are just some preliminary numbers that I came up with. And like I said, I know I talked with Carol about this. And so there's some of these that have to stay and need to be there, and some that maybe we could eliminate, add into just like a general unassigned fund balance that we have. So in totaling up all, and this is every fund balance that we have, this would be from, you know, the public safety, the community services, which is like the street and other government funds that are dedicated for those, including the water and sewer fund. The total fund balance that I kind of came up with was around $87.5 million. Now that does include the water fund and the sewer fund, and that in and of itself is $38 million right there. And that's before the stuff that's coming out this year. So that would reduce that down considerably on that. But so that's kind of what's that. So I kind of just started at that big number and then worked my way down, taking out, you know, all these certain fund balances. So like the water and sewer fund, $38.5 million coming out. The library fund is in there. That's $1.7 million. So taking that out of that fund balance, because those are, in my opinion, those need to stay there, should stay there. I'm sure Lacey would agree with that in the back, on that. So leaving those be, not really touching those. Within the fund balance, we also have impact fees that are in there, and that can't be touched. Those have to be used for, you know, new growth, for like a new park, new police cars. You can't just go out and pay employees with that money, and That's 4.5 million in the impact fee park, 227,000 in the impact fee police, and then there's an impact fee loan to fire 51 and fire 01 of $3.2 million. And then you have assigned community services. This is kind of the streets we were talking about, where Brent's gonna use around $2 million, I think, coming out of that 7.7 million that's in there for streets. ITD and Blaine, there's about $2 million in an account that's for improvements. We took over Blaine and Cleveland a few years ago, and so that, if I'm not mistaken, is dedicated for those improvements there and to keep that going. So taking that out. Cemetery has a fund balance of around 2.3 million. That's adding in the perpetual care fund and a few of the others on that. The airport, as was mentioned earlier, is pretty low, at 91,000 right now, and going down a little bit more, it sounds like, on that proposal. Recreation is a fund balance of $993,000. Now, those are cemetery, airport, and recreation have to be used for that. You can't take that money and use it somewhere else on that. So that recreation, that 993,000, you can't take that and use it in another category. It needs to be used for recreation purposes.
Mr. Mayor, I don't wanna knock you off stride. I just wanna make sure, are we looking at, is this document the same as the numbers that you're talking about? Cause it doesn't look the same to me.
Are, in a sense, that he's pulling the numbers that he's talking about, he's pulling them off of this page here. So for example, when he's talking about the cemetery recreation, they are over in the third column. They're under assigned for community services.
Okay.
So
We're just calling them something different then.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that 3.4, sorry about that, that 3.466 million, so that's cemetery, airport, recreation. The 9.8 million, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Brent, that would be the ITD Blaine of 2 million, and then the assigned for streets of about 7.7 million. So just separating that up, but the total would be 9.8 million under the community services. And so then also taking out, and this won't be on here, but proposal of some fund balances being used this year. One for police cars, around $628,000, helping pay the overtime for the fire department. Currently at $182,000, but most likely to rise on that, I would imagine. And then the fire loan Station 3 of being paid of $2.2 million on that coming out of theirs. Assigned city projects, which you see on there is, where is that at? 6.67. Oh, there it is down below. So the sign for city projects, and that's going to include, the recreation building that's under construction right now. It's going to include the city pool, rehabilitation that's coming up, and then those are the two main ones. And then there's a few others after that, but that kind of eats up the majority of that. The committed capital. Let's see, committed capital outlay, is that on there? So for golf carts, so this is other parts of fund balance that's being proposed to be used, is $320,000 more or less for golf carts. And then there's a community capital outlay for Treasure Valley Community College of around $350,000, which you see there under assigned for building capital maintenance on the far right, where it says the 354, 458 for Treasure Valley Community College. And I think that's for like updates to that, improvements, things like that, if I'm not mistaken, on that. So kind of the goal that I have is, again, there's things that have to stay and should stay, but trying to eliminate some of the funds that are on there. Perhaps two specifically is the committed for public safety portion of that, and then the assigned for building safety. And lumping that into our unassigned for operations is 10.2 million, and that number comes up from a 20% calculation of, and I've got it right here, I could read it so I don't get it wrong. I could find it. Let's see. So per policy on page 38 of the audit report, strives to maintain an unassigned fund balance for unanticipated emergencies of approximately 20% of the actual GAAP basis expenditures. That's general acceptable accounting practices, if I remember right, for my accounting classes.
Accounting principles.
Principles, that's close. So that's what that number comes from. 6.3 million is the 20%. For emergencies is unassigned, and then 3.8 million in there available for operations is unassigned. And that's, again, I think that discussion came up where, because we don't get our tax dollars every month, so that helps us carry over to our next one on that. So So again, my proposal would be to leave that, the unassigned for operations as it is, to cover those expenses, but reevaluating the public safety. Right now it's divvied out to fire and police. Not that they're not important, but lumping those into one where if we do need a fire truck or we need something, they can still have that in the general, fund balance. But, but I think the thing is trying to get it centralized so that we kind of remember that it's not the police department's money, it's not the fire department's money, it's not the engineering or the building, it's the people's money. And so, using that in those terms where if there's a need that comes up, comes to city council and commit, for the police cars, for example, come to city council and say, we need, $600,000 from the unassigned fund balance to buy some new police cars. And so that's kind of the thought there, is just consolidating that so it's a little bit easier to understand. I'm still trying to understand it, and I've been doing this for hours and hours over the last several months. So trying to consolidate that and look and see do we have where we have such a high fund balance, is it unhealthy to have too much money? In the past, it was kind of common practice to save, money up and then pay cash for, trying to pay cash for a fire station and things like that, where it's good to do that for certain, but when you get to larger items, whether it's a fire station or even a fire truck these days are getting so expensive, is that better to, rather than save for 10 years to pay cash for it, is it better to utilize that money from the citizens rather than saving it, and then go to a bond, for a police station or a bond for a fire station, and let put it on us to convince the taxpayers why they should want to have to tax themselves more, rather than us saving all that money for those years to then go and pay for it cash or take loans from departments. So trying to simplify it, it's a lot of work doing that because there's a lot of things that you have to be aware of. But in kind of doing that, for example, the assigned for building safety, that the 4.3 million there, would that be better? And Brent, you can jump in and correct me on any of this at any time. But a lot of that in there is, and these have grown a lot over the last couple of years because of some ARPA funding, because of lack of projects not being done that are being done this year. For example, that 6.67 million of city projects will actually be wiped out in the next couple of years, if I'm not mistaken, because that's just projects that have rolled over and rolled over. And so there's things like that. And then, lack of, being able to fill positions. And so that's added into there too. So obviously that's going to stop. So we need to have a fund balance, but the question is, what is a healthy fund balance? We don't want to take too much money from the people. We want to be able to take what we need and provide for emergency services like, Snowmageddon Part 2. Hopefully it doesn't come, but that we have that money in there to go in and use it, where we're not scrambling. But again, not being over cautious either, where we're taking so much money that it's just sitting there when it could be being put to use by the people that paid it in their own pockets. So that's where that's one discussion. And then the other discussion is, in kind of the calculations I looked at, I think if we consolidated some of that, used some of that fund balance that I think is an overage, is around $6 to $7 million, I think we could utilize. And if that was the case, what's the best way to utilize that? Is it to do a city project that we think is important for the citizens? Is it to, reduce our levy rate even more, so that the taxpayers get hit less than what they're going to get hit, coming up in not too long, by the end of the year on that. And there's pros and cons to all of that. So I'm not saying this is an easy solution or anything like that, but one last thing maybe to put into context and then open that for discussion and thoughts, from anybody and everybody, is we are going to see a considerable tax shift coming up, with this next, when money starts coming out of the property tax dollar. So for example, the county put together a tax liability shift that shows from commercial to residential from 2017 to today, to 2022 proposed, where in 2017 it was pretty darn close to the two. So if you had a levy rate, because the levy rate stays the same for everybody, but you've had such a spike in prices of homes that has way offset the increase of commercial. Commercial's gone up, fairly steadily, but the way that houses have gone up is just astronomical. So even though they have the same levy rate, for example, and what some of the numbers that I was getting shown is Walmart, for example, believe will actually pay less property taxes this year than they did last year, because their value went up slightly, but the levy rate's going down considerably, so they will actually pay less taxes. The property or the homeowners across the street from Walmart are gonna see a nearly 50% increase in their property taxes, because their values went up, 50 to 70%. So even though the levy rate's going down, they're still gonna be hit pretty hard. So that's, something that's really tough to, I asked Carol today, and I knew the answer, but I was like, could we just, provide something to the homeowners that have homeowner exemptions? But we can't do that. It's gotta be kind of level across the board. The legislature can, and we hope that they do, but we're kind of stuck with this right now is, do we try to provide tax relief in reducing that? Do we just leave it the same? Do we do a city project that the citizens want and could get done with that money? But again, it's gonna be a tough hit for the citizens when they get their property tax bill. Assessments have gone out. And again, assessments are assessments. They're gonna go up and down. It's the levy rate that really determines what your property taxes are. But when you have such a seismic shift, in the growth rate between commercial and industrial to residential, that's where you start to see those numbers hitting hard on homeowners. And so is there something we can do to do that? So that's kind of the thoughts that I've had, is can we use some of this to offset that? And then I guess that's one other thing. It's a 1-year deal, right? We can't do this every year. We have what I feel is substantial fund balance that we could use for a one-time reduction. But then again, that's a one-time deal. We can't do that year in and year out, because then we'll be bankrupt before too long. So that's where, we try to get the legislature to stop and say, okay, we stepped up, we looked at what we could do. Now what can you do to provide long-lasting relief for the citizens? I know there's a discussion coming up before too long at the county with, I think Representative Moyle is gonna be there, and Senator Rice. He won't be there next year, but he'll be at that. And then Senator Grow, who's gonna, I think, take the charge from Senator Rice on doing some of these things. So trying to figure out with them, look, this is where we're at. This is why these shifts are happening. What can we do to even that playing field? Do we try to do something this year? But again, trying to make sure the taxpayers know, look, this is just a one-time deal, because you don't want to reduce it this now and then all of a sudden it's back up to the same level, but they're going to see that as a big tax increase on that. So it's kind of a tricky situation on that. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I'll just throw that out there, and discussions and questions and comments from any of the council or any of the staff as well. Yeah, jump in.
So,
Do you mind jumping on your mic just so people can hear, grab it on the recording?
so by reducing the levy rate though, would it make a substantial difference? Are we talking $20 or $200 off your tax bill? Did you look at the numbers that far yet?
So we started, I'm not sure if Carol and I talked till about 5 o'clock, so it was just before. Actually, I think it even got to 5:30. So still looking at that to see what those are. And I don't think Carol, maybe she had the chance to look at that. And we can pull that up to see, what is that difference gonna be if we reduce it, by $6 million? I mean, how much? And that's the thing too, is when you do that, it's gonna make a big difference.
It will.
But it may make a bigger difference on commercial than residential. So that's the thing too, you have to look at is how big of a difference does it make on the residential, in that regards. Like I said, it'd be nice if we could separate those two out and give a different levy for the residential than the commercial, but our hands are tied there. So, do you have any of those numbers, Carol, or?
I'm pulling up the spreadsheet right now so we can kind of run through the.
Awesome. What are you doing, Counselor?
No, while she's doing that, it's ironic that we're talking about it right now, because of all the URA meetings I've been to, which is only one, just dropped in on one the other day, and I specifically remember a comment because there were some needs that were going to be able to be covered, and the comment was made, we're okay as long as we don't touch levy rates. And so I think there might be some other factors outside of just budget that would be affected as well, and still trying to put it all together in my own mind.
Yeah, no, and that's a great comment, because it would, and that's important to know, that if you drop the levy rate for the city, that equally does that for the urban renewal, where they won't have as much money in there, I guess, for some of their projects, so they would have to reevaluate some of that. So, yes, Mr. Orton?
Okay.
Mayor, if you don't mind me throwing in a comment.
No, go right ahead. And just so everybody on staff knows, you will not hurt my feelings if you disagree with me 100% and throw it another way. So this is just for conversation and to see kind of where everything's at, so.
So, and Carol, I'm gonna make a mess and then Carol can clean it up. So, Mayor, to your point.
Seems to be my specialty.
This idea, Mayor, that you were mentioning, I like to think of it as like a value pool, right? Residential and non-residential are all stuck in the same value pool. And if residential becomes, last year, residential was coming in at 77% of the total value pool, adding up the taxable assessed value of non-residential, industrial, commercial, whatever, and the taxable assessed value of residential. So if they were 77% of that value pool, then they're paying 77% of the taxes. And it just comes down to that. And then the other thing is, we don't have control as a city over the levy rate exactly, right? What you have control over is the cash numbers. Like, basically, if our budget's $20 million for easy numbers, our property tax budget is $20 million 1 year, and you say, well, we're going to take the 3% increase because inflation is 8%, and so that puts us at, $20,600,000. Then that's where we have control. And then there's the two statutory limitations. One is 90 mil cap. So if our mill rate or our levy rate got up to 90 mils, or got up beyond that, it has to stay at 90. So we have to cut cash out of the property tax budget until it gets back down to 90. And then the other limitation is that 3%. So that's the stuff that we really have control over as a city. And then the levy rate, with the House Bill 389 stuff, right, that said, oh, well, you get 8% of your growth. And one of the council members asked in previous discussions, what happens to the rest of that? If we had 10% growth, but we only took, because you take that $20,600,000 and you divide it by the taxable assessed value in the city, and that gives you your levy rate. Then you get to multiply that levy rate by the new growth and annexations that happened that year. And so if that's, and that used to be the way before House Bill 389, that you would come up with, that could be another, depending on the growth, that could be another $1,500,000 that could be added to the general fund and is needed, because with the new growth, you got to cover the cost of the officers that are necessary and the firemen that are necessary and whatever. But that's how the structure worked. House Bill 389 limited that to 8% total growth. So if you took the 3% and you got 5% left that can happen in new growth and annexation, and then the money above that would have been eligible but is no longer eligible just goes against the denominator. It goes against that total taxable assessed value. And so because that denominator is becoming larger, you're taking your, again, back to the example, your $20,600,000 and dividing it by this larger denominator, you're going to come up with a lower levy rate. There's my mess, and Carol can clean up.
Thank you, Brent. All right. So we talked last Tuesday about this is called the L2 worksheet. This is the worksheet I get from the county, and they will populate it once they get some firmer numbers. But right now, these are the estimates that they have provided with me. So we start with our highest property tax budget, which was last year, or the current year that we're in right now, fiscal year 22. So that's $20.5 million. We get to take 3% of that budget. So 3%, the math calculates 3%. And we will see the math calculation on the next spreadsheet on the L2 worksheet. So then it takes the 3%, adds it to the $20.5 million. That's how we get the line 19, 19C, 21.13. So that's, they take that 21.13. Then we get our operating value. This operating value comes later, but we have to use the current year because of the timing of everything statutorily. So we have an operating property value that then goes into this. So then there's a math calculation that Brent was just talking about that takes what we can grow the budget by the 3%, divide it by our current net taxable value.
That's less the exemptions.
Yes, because it's net taxable value.
Yeah.
So it's less any exemptions and urban renewal. And then that's how we get to this preliminary levy rate. So right now, if someone wants to do math, or we can have Rob try and do math, I don't know. So I'm hoping the spreadsheet will allow the math. If we can scroll over to like maybe column I or J or something mathematically. Oh, it's merged. Never mind. Okay.
You're
both engineers. I hope you can both.
No, I know, engineers
Come up with
can,
two different
engineering
numbers.
math can
Take
really
the average.
help. So, let's try the L2 worksheet and see if we can do some math
Yeah.
calculations off to the side. See if it lets us do that without any merging of cells. Good, okay. So up at the top, let's, right there, where we see the levy rate. The estimated levy rate on number 4 there, 0.38 mils. So we're gonna pretend somebody has a $400,000 home, okay?
Yeah.
I know. $400,000 home.
That's a start home these days. Mhm.
That was what you got assessed on last year. That's your net taxable value. Multiply by the levy rate of this year, 0.0058.
You have to type it.
You have to type it.
How's that 400,000 less the homeowner exemption?
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe you have a $5.25 million home. Okay. We can go with lower numbers. I'm happy to work with lower numbers.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be the city piece only to the tax on your payment last November. Now your home just went up with the homeowner's exemption and whatever. Now we're at 500,000 times the 0.0038.
What was the value the year before you put in there, 400?
400.
What's the average though? We should probably, because isn't it like?
I think a homeowner, the medium I thought I heard in the news last week is Caldwell, Canyon County is around 450, 460.
But how much did it go up though, average? Wasn't it like 40% on average?
Somewhere you're at,
44? So maybe let's go with that number. Can we go with a 40% increase instead of a,
40% increase.
so
So
400,000
400,000 times 40%, Rob.
times 0.14? It'd be 1.4 to get a 40% increase. And then.
560,000, okay? So in the 1990 number, or 1900 number, now just add the 60 to that 500,000. Okay, that's gonna be Mr. Joe Blow's, city piece on his tax return, sorry. I'm back in my tax commission days. Your property tax. That's what he's going to pay.
So if we didn't do anything, it'd go down almost $200.
If you do exactly what we talked about last Tuesday, if you take the new construction and you take the 3%, that's what he's going to get. He, she, whomever.
It's a $200
Reduction.
For if you have if your house was valued at 525 and now it's devalued at 700,000.
So we did 400 and 560, I thought.
Well, 400 include the property, the homeowner's exemption.
Right, and now your value went up 40%. We did 40% of, so, okay, so let's come back to the math. Of 400 plus 125,000 is off to the side so that we know what values we're really working with. We said a $525,000 home on that line right there.
And I'd like to look at too, like a, say like a, you know, a starter home that used to be like 250, that's now like 400. What would be the difference there? Because if you had a 250, really your value is 125. But now, if it went up to 400, that 125 stays the same. So now it's that is getting reduced, diminishing reduction. So I'd like to see that too.
Okay, so 525 is the value of the home, less your homeowner's exemption. Over in column H,
That would have been.
that's where we get the 400,000.
Yeah.
Okay, now, 40% of the 525 minus 125, right below it. Poor Rob, you're doing an awesome job. You are. I'm gonna have to bring you donuts and lunch for all your hard work these past few days. That's why I'm having you do it, because I couldn't see it either. Will this help if I turn this to you so you can see? Okay. Well, they're looking behind them, so. Okay, please.
So maybe while he's doing that, so I ran a quick, and it was 0.0056, is that right? Was that 56 mils?
5.8.
Oh, 5.8, and now it's 38 mils?
Right now for tonight's discussion, that's where we're at, before we're going with one of the, with a proposal the mayor has.
So if you had, just throwing some of these numbers, if you had a house that was valued at 250,000 last year, you were $725 in taxes, and that house went up to 400,000 this year, which I think is kind of the average or standard, then you're up to $1,045. So you have like a $300+ increase for what was an average home.
But if our levy rate drops 20 points, what does that do for us?
So if it drops another,
If it drops to 3.8 instead of 5.8.
so 3/8 is $1,045.
Oh, 3.8.
Yeah. Yep.
So isn't that interesting how a higher priced home gets a reduction where a
The
lower
rich get
priced
richer and
home
the poor get poorer,
gets a higher rate?
unfortunately.
How much did you say? 700 and what?
725, so if you had a $250,000 house, because you get your 125 property exemption, takes it to 125, times that by the 0.0058, you get 725.
Would they get the, yeah, because that's the max they can go, is 50% of 250.
And then those $250,000 homes are easily worth 400,000 today, so then take the exemption off of that, you're at 275 and times the 0.0038, and that's where you go up to 1,045.
So $300 increase, whereas this one, this example gets a $200 decrease.
So years ago, I chopped and boned your house a while. Yeah, right?
So, and that's, you know, we can't speak to what the other taxing districts are going to do and how that falls out, but this is what you would be looking at, with City of Caldwell, for your value, whatever that value, assessed value is that you just got a few weeks ago. So can we go to the L2 calculator? The calculator tab. Yep. The L2 worksheet.
So kind of while you're doing that, so if we, like that same home, let's say a $250,000 home a year ago that's now worth 400,000, if you did it, and I don't know what it would go to if you did that 6 million, if you're able to move, say, 6 or 7 million over, then your 1,045 tax bill would go to $660 tax bill.
If you did what?
If you dropped the meals to 0.0024. If it went down to 25, I don't know what it'd be, but if it went down to 24 meals, that's what you'd pay $660 rather than at the 38 meals, it's $1,045.
Can we go to the blue tab, the
So
calculator?
that'd be $400.
So I'm not sure with this new,
My kids bought a house 2 years ago and they couldn't find anything for 2.25.
Oh, yeah.
So, I think
And I
that
don't
was a
know.
few years ago, that was probably
But if
3
you
or 4 years ago.
bought it when Chuck did, that's what we're talking about, his is gonna be way
Oh, we're talking about, this is Chuck's up here, I didn't realize that, okay.
Well, and values are typically, at least the property tax values are typically low, like they paid that, still may have been appraised at 250, wherever it is, so.
so if
Or
we,
yours.
I don't know how this works, because if we take it down,
Well, maybe.
here's the other long-term piece that we're talking here. If we take this levy rate down lower, this also will affect urban renewal's budget that we will be having a workshop on in a couple weeks. Urban renewal's budget
Debbie's lap.
times, it takes everyone's levy rate that they submit from each taxing district. So the lower this levy rate goes, the lower the urban renewal budget will go in this year. We've already planned and committed to projects based on this, so if this goes lower, we will have to, urban renewal will have to look at cutting projects.
And
And then it will also affect, as we saw on Tuesday, what happens when we sunset. That levy rate goes even lower, and when that levy rate goes lower, that's less new construction that comes into us next year.
Can I add to that, Carol?
Yes.
So, and please, I'm, what? You need the microphone. Thank you. I'm gonna do the same thing Brent did. I'm gonna make a mess and have you clean it. So when we were doing our budget projections, after urban renewal sunsets, the estimate was 3 point something and change that would come to the city tax revenue.
Correct.
If the levy rate were to drop to 2.5 or 2.4, that would no longer be 3 million and change, that would be much less that we were looking, and, am I correct there?
You're correct.
Okay.
but only
So,
for 1 year,
ran
the
a-
mayor's saying.
I ran a scenario
Well,
today.
if it goes up the next year, the taxpayer's gonna get a huge hit.
That's right. So if we drop it, if we drop it $400, and then next year they're gonna have $400
Plus.
plus. Just that's exactly what happened in Nampa 2 years ago with the whole gypsy, remember 2 years ago budget when we talked about, we call it the gypsy money, that was the government's proposed something tax thing. You're gonna give the taxpayer credit one time, and then the next year.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that you have to take into consideration, is it will level back out. So it may not go like way above, but it's gonna seem like that, because you're going from here to there, so.
And it depends on how many people and how much of a raise we give in the next year, how.
Correct.
Yep.
So for example, I ran a scenario. Can you go to the Thursday folder and pull up that sunsetting analysis?
Hate to be killjoy here again, but remember, urban renewal said that originally we're supposed to get 10 million back.
No, we never said that.
It's, they sure did.
No, no,
Mrs.
no.
Warwick said that to me in one of the urban renewal meetings.
Okay, I can't speak for Mrs. Warwick, but that has never come from my mouth in any of my presentations to any council member, any urban renewal commissioners. I cannot speak what another urban renewal commissioner has spoken to other people out there. But what I can show you is the math and the facts of how this will work.
And I
I'm
think,
not holding you responsible for that. I'm just saying that that's exactly what she said. You can go back on the minutes if you want, that we're getting $10 million, and it wasn't true.
No,
Just
it
wasn't.
will, yeah, never been true. And I think that's been a huge misnomer out there with a lot of people.
Sure.
And because urban renewal has a $10 million budget, it was never going to ever be that amount that comes back to the city at all. Because that $10 million budget comes from all of these taxing districts. They contribute to that budget. Caldwell's piece is a $5 million budget that we get. Not we, but the urban renewal gets from Caldwell's levy rate. So the math shows the levy rate will affect this number.
I have a question.
Yes.
And I'm still learning, so this is probably just simple. But is there a reason why we can't take that money and just write everybody a check saying that it's for property tax assistance? And then we don't have to put it in there and make it grow in a year from now?
yeah, and
That would be a huge burden on the finance department to issue checks for.
No, I'm trying to come up with something,
Sure.
because you're saying that it's gonna, if there's a decrease of, however many $100, and then they're hit again, what I'm saying is, if we leave it the same, so there's not that huge increase, but then we somehow find a way to reimburse people that money. So whether it's writing a check, crediting an account, whatever it is, I'm just wondering if there's another way to do it, So it doesn't look like your property taxes are reduced and not explained and then
You would,
increased
yeah,
so
so
much more.
we would send that other document to the county, we would get our 21 million. Now, to give somebody a credit, the county would have to give us that information to know who to cut the check to. Then we would have to take it out of somebody's fund balances in here to do that credit.
Okay, so not an option, but
It's going on, Council Register's thought, the check wouldn't be the same for each person.
No.
The check would be different, and the more the expensive the house, the smaller the check almost, because their property taxes don't go up the same as a
We would have, I think we have 20-some households that are on our utility billing, 20-some thousand, Brent, what, 26, 23,000, 28,000, is that your projection?
23,000, I think.
23,000 households. So that would be a lot of checks to cut.
well, and that, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I meant literally, but I mean, so I don't know if there's
one rabbit hole, you just come right down to another.
even a city account that could be credited, you know, instead of having to go through this whole process.
Yeah, so kind of going off the, and like I said, I don't know the logistics of it or even the legality. Obviously, the state can do it, the feds can do it, because you get those state stimulus checks, the federal. It'd be kind of cool if we could do a city stimulus check. So if you had, let's say there was that, that 6 million that you could come up with out of the fund balance. So I just did a quick calculation out of the 23,000, and this is just a number, just that way you can, maybe it's not even worth it, comes up to $260. And that would be per household, not per person. So that would be the number more, and that's again a ballpark figure, and even if it's possible or not, but, so I guess the discussion is it worth it to go down that?
How much is it that, we're talking about 6 million, you said? Or
Yeah, I
three?
think around 6 million that you could, again, then that's kind of up for debate on those totals and where you feel comfortable with the fund balance.
So if you don't do the property tax relief, if it's not worth it, or whatever, how much is owed on the pool?
How much is, sorry, what?
Owed still on the pool to finish?
So 2.5 million roughly, I think with the contingency was right around 2.7, does that sound right?
The city projects account whole is 2.5 million,
Mm-hmm.
but the quote that we got from the contractor is at 2.7 and some change.
Yeah, and that's not included in that, so that's part of the, I feel okay, I don't know why I can't see, but, the 6.3 million of city projects is included in that, so that would stay, that's proposed to stay in there and not to come out on that, so.
I might just add some perspective right now, Mayor. I really like what you said when you opened this up about healthy fund balance, because I believe there is some room to approach some of these fund balances and use them. I do. My concern is, at what level we're gonna do that. And I'll speak for me. Maybe everybody else is understanding this a lot better than I am and has already factored all these things in. But there's so many unanswered questions in my mind about doing this. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't or shouldn't do it at some level.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, our when we bond for things in our bond rating, right? I feel that I need to know, will this affect our bond rating? Because, we're talking about under this scenario, we would bond for more projects. Well, if we don't have the requisite amount of money in reserve and our bond rating goes up, well, that's gonna cost us a lot more. So I need to understand that, and maybe that's a Carol question. And just a couple more, and then what I sat on the audit committee for a couple years. I can't remember who's on it now. I think, yeah. We had a great audit, and we have such a clean audit. I would want to find out, how does this affect our audit, if at all, right? Because I do have some concerns that the audit could come out differently, perhaps, if we don't have the right amount, on hand. The urban renewal budget, I didn't realize that was going to affect some of the projects, and so I would want to see which projects are gonna get cut,
That
which,
would be the Urban Renewal Commission's decision.
right, and
Mhm.
so it'd be interesting to hear from Mr. Porter, you know, what that looks like. So, in a nutshell, I guess what I'm trying to say, and I hate meetings, but I feel like, you know, it's 9 o'clock already. I don't feel comfortable making this big shift. I mean, maybe we do need to make a big shift, and I think you make some pretty compelling arguments that we should. I just need to understand the answer to some of these other questions before I say, yep, that's the way we should go, and especially in light of, you know, the economic downturn that's probably going to take place. I just need some more comfort level, and maybe we task Carol with answering a few more questions for us, and again, I'd like to hear from Urban Renewal. So I guess what I'm trying to say, Mayor, is, man, we're being asked to make a pretty darn big decision tonight, or at least give Carol some guidance so that she can get the numbers to the county. And I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Right? Do you know what I?
Yeah, oh no, I do, 'cause yeah, it is, trust me, I've been going over this so
Yeah.
much the last couple of months, and so, good news, bad news. Good news is I think that we actually there's another meeting, like a just-in-case meeting that was scheduled, if I'm not mistaken, was there not, after tonight?
Nope,
Oh,
we didn't.
okay, then never mind, so the
Nope,
bad
you
news is
wanted-
we might have another, so, but we could always, yeah, but we can always schedule another meeting and
And
discuss it, so.
here's something too, council. We don't and I can't speak for the mayor, and I will not put any words in the mayor's mouth. This is big. But if we're saying, as Ms. Register had suggested, we don't touch the property tax, but we look at another way of getting there, then perhaps this is something we work on through the year. We don't know where we're gonna land at the end of this fiscal year. We've got 10.2 million in unassigned fund balance. That number may not be there. 3 years ago, we had 3.3 million in unassigned fund balance, which didn't meet the 20% that we said in our audit per policy. So, that's a big swing to take 7 million out of here to give property tax relief, or...
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to say is that, I mean, if you, what did the former mayor call you, Madam Money? If Madam Money doesn't even totally understand where this gets us, how am I supposed to, in the next hour or so, say, that's where we're heading, I love that. I just need more, I need more information. Because I think from what I've heard other council members mention tonight, I think there's a pathway forward, right? I think there's a middle ground or some sort of pathway forward that we can all probably agree on. I just need to understand the answer to more questions like that and some of these other questions. That's how I feel about it right now.
No, it's great. Councilor Williams, did you have any comments you wanna make, or?
Have a path forward that we spend this next year working on, a policy that is a fund balance policy for each of our funds. And maybe it's a resolution to achieve one of the mayor's proposals, is a resolution to uncommit the public safety money. Because of that public safety money, that $6,092,000, 1.9 is for the police fund. But we've heard the police wants to ask for cop cars of $653,000. That's not picking up this year. If Lieutenant Wright gets this year's cop cars, that's another $500,000. So of the 6 million, 1.9 belongs to police, and they're gonna already be spending about $1 million in cop cars if that gets fulfilled.
Mr. Mayor.
So that just went down. The fire is gonna spend all of their fund balance. They have $182,000. The mayor identified that with their overtime budget. So what's left is the Fire Fund 51, the capital in the fire fund. But while that says 3.9 million, and let me hand this out to you guys so you can follow along.
Yeah, and maybe you wanna go ahead and say something?
Yeah,
You should have that. Yeah.
Maybe I'm the only one, but I'm getting a drink from a fire hydrant tonight, right? There's a lot of information coming at us right now, And, we were talking about fund balance, now we're talking about levy rate. I do appreciate the reminder that every economic forecast, I've looked at says we're headed into a downturn. And in light of that, and in light of inflation, and especially in light of the decision that was made last night, which, I shared with you earlier, somebody was telling me, a city employee, that their family has been putting food on a credit card, and how thankful they were for the proposal you made to take care of them. I think we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. I think we need to do a lot more for our employees. That, in my mind, is one of the best ways we could use fund balance. We've got money in the bank. Taking care of our employees has got to be number one. I want to be sure we're leveraged okay to do even more. A 10% increase effectively is no increase with inflation at 9%. And so I'd love to reconsider how we could do more of what you started last night, because we can't do a lot about inflation. That's a little bit above your pay grade even, Mr. Mayor.
Way above my pay grade.
But I do think, as we think of the responsible ways to use the resources that are ours, I'd rather look at ways we can hang on to some of those funds to take care of our employees more.
I was gonna ask a question that was kind of in line with that. So the fund balance doesn't have to be used on one project. It can be used, broken up and used
Correct.
as
So,
seen fit?
yeah.
Okay, so my next question, just as an example, for Lieutenant Wright, actually, with the 10% increase that the officers got, do you know how far behind you are from an average pay in the Treasure Valley? Is it just after that? So, just as an example, so if the police department had a 5% raise, then that would bring you closer to an average of where people are being paid in the Treasure Valley. Okay, so I agree with Jeff in that sense, that if some of that can be taken to offer those raises to bring our officers or
All of our
other,
employees.
right, closer to these average wages. I mean, I know they're all gonna be different, fire, police, and admin staff or whatever, but especially public safety, in my opinion, obviously. I think that would be something worth looking at too. If it's not gonna make enough of a difference in the property tax, or it's going to cause alarm, right, like they were saying, to pull it away and then bring it back and give, Carol a heart attack if she has to write too many checks.
I feel my blood pressure going up.
Can I condense this a little bit?
Yeah,
I think everybody here has a really good idea. I think we just gotta put it together. So, first of all, let me clarify before anybody throws a shoe at me or anything. I am in 100% agreement with the pay raises and the hiring personnel. We're way far behind, I'm not arguing with any of that. So, kind of condensing this thing is, going on what Ms. Mitchell said, we leave the taxes and the levy rate where they sit today. The base rate plus the 3%. And that's what we tax on the approximately 0.0038%. And then we set, like Ms. Mitchell said, benchmarks for our fund balance. When those fund balances are above those benchmarks, we do like Ms. Register said, and we return that to the taxpayers. But we don't do it the complicated way of writing every taxpayer a check. We instruct the county assessor to put a $300 credit or a $400 credit or whatever on every person's account that files for homeowner's exemption. So that doesn't go for commercial, that doesn't go for apartment complexes, that goes for people who live in their homes. And each person gets a $300 or $400 tax credit, and the city of Caldwell writes one check to the county assessor. I don't know where that's legal. I'm just winging it. But but we
I
meet
like
our benchmarks, we make sure that the money is in the bank before we send out a check. But at the end of the day, the taxpayers that lives in their home get somewhat of a rebate or a refund, or however you wanna frame that. Anyway, that's my.
I like it.
You like it?
I like it, and I wanna also figure out how to get them raises. But I like that too.
Okay.
Maybe we
Anyway,
can do
I don't know if
both.
it works. I'm just
Right.
saying.
So
we can get into it.
I don't know how those rebates would work. That would take a lot of, and not that I'm opposed to this. Don't take that as I'm opposed to having that engaged conversation, because I do respect the relationship I have with the county. That would be a lot of discussion for the county and for me to understand what is that process, how do we get there, and what are the effects? If we give a rebate, does it go against the L2, and does it affect the levy rate? I don't know behind the scenes. I have a suspicion it will,
Well, it would
in
be
order to
after
get
we
there.
collect taxes. That wouldn't be before.
I don't know if they can,
And I don't know.
yeah, I just don't know if that
The
can
first
get
thing
there.
you're gonna throw a shit at me about is,
I should have known my lower 10%.
I've worked for the city almost as long as Dave Wright.
Oh,
Um,
still, yeah, 4 million, yeah.
Hiring 27 employees and giving a 10% raise is the biggest it's ever done in our history. So it's a big check to cut. So we have to understand that we have to support that every year going forward. Plus more, as Lieutenant said, you know, we got to keep going here, we can't stop. So, I don't know,
I agree with you. I think the other number that we need to be looking at though is how much it costs us every time we lose an officer. And how much it costs every time we lose an officer and then for that training, because I've heard that it's close to somewhere around $100,000 an officer, and that we've lost something like 30 officers in 3 years or and somebody else will have to, I mean, Dave's probably gonna have to qualify that. But if that's true, and we're spending that much money losing officers and hiring officers, then at what point do we say it's worth to spend the money on the raises or to make them average to keep them, so that we're not paying
That's kind of
that?
apples and oranges, because you're 100% right. It costs probably close to $100,000. You're 100% right. But the taxpayer this year is gonna be looking on how much his tax bill goes up.
Sure, I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, I think we're going down two different paths. But if we do get to this point where we do talk about officers and, trying to make them more average in the Treasure Valley so that we're retaining them and not losing them, it's on,
Dr. Caldwell's above average, but just.
you know what I'm saying? Pay-wise, if we ever, get to a point where we have that conversation, that it's also important to look at what we're losing every time we're losing an officer. That's all I'm trying to say. And maybe the mayor knows somebody over at the county that he can talk to about whether or not we can do Chris's idea of those rebates on the actual, tax bill. Do you
No,
know
it's
any?
definitely worth looking into.
Do you know anybody there that
I
works
might,
on the money
yes,
side?
I
Okay.
might, so.
So, Mr. Mayor, I feel like just to Chris's point, I feel like we're developing this list of questions, right, that need to be answered.
Mhm.
That's one of them for sure. The audit, our bond rating, right? I think there's this group of questions that we need to let our staff go back and get the answers on so that we can make the best decision. Back to the point, that you guys were just chatting about it, and after hearing Lieutenant Wright, I mean, we were all giving thumbs up last night and passing each other on the back, and then you hear Lieutenant Wright say, well, everybody else is giving 10%. And
Well,
I'll finish
yeah.
and then, but I just feel so deflated now, right? Because we're treading water, and we're basically now in the same spot that we were, because all these other communities are doing that. And I think, we need to take I'll get off of this real quickly, but we need to take a more long-term approach to getting those salaries back up to where they want to be. We did a great first step, and we really needed to do it, and it was under your leadership, Mayor, that we did it. But we need to take this long-term approach to see how we can help these guys be successful.
Well, one thing I can tell you, is that historically, the other agencies have done that. They've offered raises to their employees, and Caldwell has kind of stayed stagnant. So by giving that 10%, at least it's a push forward that they have not had, even though it's not catching them up. But I do think that's a conversation that needs to be had with the police department, very similarly to the way it's had with the fire department, right? Where they know their needs and they can express that to the council, and I don't know that the police department has come forward in the last, however many years and said, this is where we need to have our officers because this is how much it's costing to lose them. Not just a morale issue or whatever it is, but when you take money for money, if we're losing, I mean, I'm not a mathematician, but if 30 times 100,000 is, okay, so 150,000 times 30 is what? Somebody get their Excel sheet out.
100,000.
How much?
4.5 million.
Okay, so if we've lost 4.5 million in salaries, training, whatever, in the last 3 years, could we have maybe applied even half of that to raises for the employees to retain them so that they're not taking our training and going to, Meridian or whatever, and I'm using half because maybe the other half left for another reason, who knows? But I'm just saying that I think we need to be looking at those numbers moving forward where we can, along with how we can offer some relief property-wise as well, or whatever we need to do.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilor Stodic.
Don't want to be a killjoy here, but I just want to dovetail off of what Mr. Williams said. Remember, most of the taxpayers are dealing with the 9% also, and you mentioned buying food with credit cards and stuff. Most of the taxpayers are not getting a 10% increase that I know of, on average. So that's one thing we need to keep in mind when we're discussing all this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it my turn to use Councilman Stodic's, what was it? Buzzjoy or what was your
Killjoy.
language?
Killjoy.
Killjoy,
Yeah.
thank you.
Real quick before you go, will you find out about what, Councilman Allgood was saying, if that's a possibility?
Yes, definitely, we can do that. And I mean, and I think we're obviously gonna have another meeting after this, so if there's any other thoughts that you want kind of fleshed out, and that includes staff too, if you have any thoughts to throw out now to the council to see if they'd like to look into that further. Kind of opened a can of worms tonight, but I think that's good. I think it was a can that needed to be opened.
Conversation to have.
Yes, I
And then,
agree
like
completely.
she was saying, if it's something we can work towards, at least we have a goal that we're working towards. Whether it's the property tax relief, these guys getting to their average, or both, however that works.
Yeah. Carol?
Okay, so I think something we have lost a little bit of sight on, tonight is remember back on Tuesday when I said, in order to get police and fire to their proposals of the 10 and the 2, they don't have enough funding to meet that need. So what we did is we took ARPA money to bridge the gap. That's how we got there for police and fire. Can you go back to the sunsetting spreadsheet? So what we are saying in this budget for police and fire is we're using grant money one time to balance their budget to meet the 10% and the 2%. Because we're borrowing against this sunsetting number. So can we scroll over just a little bit? General fund, police, down one more. 1 point, I can't read from here. I ran a scenario tonight for the chief. I just handed it to him. And in order for the chief to meet his budget next year,
Police chief.
Fire chief.
Oh, fire, okay.
Fire chief, he has the numbers in front of him. In order for him to meet that budget next year, he will be using all of that money, that $800 and some thousand, because that's what he's going to be using in borrowing from ARPA. So there is no growth next year in police and fire's budget, because we're borrowing ARPA money at $1.5 million to get there.
So we've got to make up 1.5 next year just to break even?
Correct.
With police and fire.
Police and fire.
I thought the ARPA thing was for 3 years.
We have one more year left. We're borrowing for 1 year. And we're borrowing this right here.
Right, so urban
Well,
renewal
you-
sunsets to make that up.
Yeah.
But when urban renewal
I don't know,
sunsets,
borrowing.
the ARPA grant money will now be replaced with that money. So now their budget is whole, but no growth.
Unless we use some of the 6 point,
But it's whole.
But it's whole.
Right, so,
if
so
we
just so
use-
I'm clear, once
Mhm.
the grant money runs out, it's replaced with the urban renewal money.
Next year, 24 budget, correct.
Okay, and when you say no growth, like, what does that mean? Like, no,
So a lot of plans have been talked over the last couple of years. When urban renewal sunsets, these departments, not just police and fire, but these departments would have an opportunity to grow their budget beyond what we have been doing in the past. And this was their tool, this was the tool in their toolbox to get there.
So I think, and Chief, you correct me if I'm wrong, what this does though, it just allows that growth to occur 1 year before.
Correct.
So it's not, I don't really, wouldn't say it's borrowing money, but it just allows to use that money this year rather than waiting a year to grow to where it would be right now. So we get to use that money this year, a year early, to use that ARPA money to where we would have been next year. That's how I would see it.
And that money will grow some as the years go by, maybe, because all taxes grow.
Correct, but we don't have the ability to grow 835,000 above. Because all we're doing is replacing. We're using it a year earlier. And if we're looking to use the 6 million in fund balance to help get staff wages increased, where is your sustainability for the years to come? Because it's not gonna come here from urban renewal.
So yeah, the numbers we're at now, I think are built in, so that would just be any if you wanted to go way above and beyond what we have now. Yes, Brent?
but I'm just making sure you and I are talking.
Thought too, that with this, if the city were to alter its, budget in such a way that the levy rate ended up lower than what it's projected right now, it would alter those projections as well. So it would,
Got
if
that.
we were able to lower the levy, it would actually lower that number too.
Yep, it would.
Let Carol enunciate it because.
So back, we've danced all around, but I think we're all trying to come to this fund balance discussion. We've talked about property tax, we've talked about urban renewal sunsetting. What Brent is saying, if we do something with property tax and we lower that, and again, I don't know how the county is going to calculate any kind of a rebate to the taxpayer. I have a feeling it will affect the levy rate. If it affects the levy rate lower, it affects this number lower.
This is based off of a 38 mil levy rate, correct?
No, this is based off the next year's projected levy rate when urban renewal's value comes in.
So 28 mils, is that what's being
Correct.
projected on?
It just gets more complicated.
It does, seriously. I
Does.
mean, it's like, I think you got your head wrapped around it and then all of a sudden like back at square one. So, but it's I think we all agree, it's 100% important. It is so important to talk about this and figure this out and take the time to do it and to do it right for so many reasons.
Oh,
So,
let's put a plan in place.
I feel
Maybe
like
we put a
we need to
plan.
do this again with a whiteboard, you know, so she can get up there and like write
I
stuff,
know
cause I need to
Normally,
figure
we're
it out.
back there and I am on the whiteboard
Yeah.
and we are doing numbers, but because this has been live streamed, we have to be here.
Well, we can bring one in for you.
Okay.
yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. So I know we're over, time and appreciate that. So, I mean, so is there anything else that council, anything that staff wants to bring up to council to consider, to have more research done? Or are we at a pretty good point, or any other thoughts from council? We've got some things that we're gonna look into to try to get some answers, yeah.
We talked about fire was whole, where is police on their money that will come out of urban renewal? Are they whole too, or are they short?
They will be when urban renewal comes in. I was running numbers today and they are at a 1 million, almost 1.1 million need to get these raises at a 10 and a 2.
So we
So-
still have 400,000 left to go.
Okay, so I will also add to that. For the past 3 years, police has never balanced their budget. What we have done is we have asked for fund balance every year for capital. So there's been they balance operations, they cannot balance capital. So we keep going to their fund balance, this 1.9, to balance their budget with capital. So that would get us to where we won't have to, hopefully, continue to dip into fund balance.
What's under the capital, sorry?
Capital,
Like,
their cars.
So the hope is too that perhaps impact fees could start to offset that and to pay for
That's
those
the
vehicles
hope.
rather than using fund balance or
We're
the
we're
taxpayer
testing
dollars.
it, and hopefully we can keep those cars on the road for 10 years, but that's the requirement. We're testing that right now.
Does sitting in the parking lot count for on the road?
I asked that question actually, Mayor. I did, didn't I, Brent? And what did you tell me, Brent? They had to be operational.
Hey, that's all right. Start it up every week or so.
I had that thought.
So.
They have to be like the Death Star, fully operational.
Okay, yes,
I just
Counselor Stoddard.
wanted to add that, when you talk about impact fees, all the more important that we need somebody in there that really promotes what's realistic and not, trying to, make the real estate folks happy or the brokers or anybody else. We need to really keep the taxpayers, in regard to making sure it's a fair price that we're charging, so.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're gonna be part of that committee or not, but somebody needs to be the champion of that thing, because I've sat on those things before in my prior years at the city, and nobody spoke up for taxpayers at all. It was all, the real estate folks are complaining, well, it's too high, we're gonna lose business and all the other stuff, so anyway.
Yeah, and so kind of a note on that, so I know I reached out to Carol and Brent today, on that, and they're meeting maybe
I'm sorry.
June 27th, I think, the impact committee is getting together. We're required to have, so state code says we have to have at least 2 either builders, developers, realtors on it, 3, and then whatever, and they have to live in the city limits. So we did revamp that. We've got, I think, some phenomenal people on there. We got a really good mix, I think. We'll have some different views and ideas, and so they meet June 27th, and I told Brent I want to be there to kind of lay that out and say, we don't want to gouge the developers and builders, but we also want to make sure it's fair, that they're not gouging the people that live here already. So I'll go to that. I'll attend. I'm not on the committee. I actually don't know if I even am allowed to be, but I'll be there and kind of give them that direction that we need to look at these hard and fast, and I think we have some really good people on there that'll look at that. So I'm excited for the new committee that's on there, and we'll be meeting very soon. And then again, so they make the proposal, comes to city council, and it's ultimately up to the city council to set that. So you can go above, below what they recommend. They're just a recommending body, and then the city council has a prerogative to accept, deny, or modify.
And we should have other city comparisons too, like we talked about before on these other things, so we know where we're at.
Yeah, and to be fair, that does depend on what's in the capital improvement plan. But really in my opinion, and I'm ready to be redirected if I'm wrong, but I believe that the right place for us to be with the committee is that their obligation is to help derive fees that align with the requirements of state code.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happened in the past that's been a little challenging is the idea that the committee should decide, well, let's cut stuff out of the capital improvement plan. We shouldn't do that, because our obligation is to hold the level of service. So if we have X number of police cars and they're eligible because we're using them for 10 years, we want to hold that level of service the same as time goes forward, and impact fees should be able to sustain that. If the council then says, well, no, we don't want the developers to have to pay that much impact fee, we're going to find another way to fund the difference and reduce the impact fee, that's the council's prerogative. What's not our prerogative as a committee, right? So we want to make sure that we kind of get that charter well understood. That's our hope.
Okay. Any other direction or questions you'd like to answer before we get to do this again?
I have one more question. Go ahead.
Yes, Council President. Yeah, sounds good.
Meeting?
Definitely.
For, what am I supposed to prepare?
All the answers to the questions that we have presented this evening, so, and
What-
the other ones that are in our mind.
Well, and I guess I'm curious, so just so for my clarity, Carol, the 10%, police are getting the 10% plus asking for two
Correct.
or four? Two to four?
Two.
Four?
So- I'm sorry?
I heard four.
Two is what was proposed.
Okay. Lieutenant Wright, are you asking for 2% or 4? She's gonna throw something at you.
Where are you gonna get the money? Please tell me.
That's your
Okay,
job, Carol.
okay,
find
so
the money.
Where's the money?
we're just saying wish list, okay, so 4%, and then fire department's got the 10 plus, do you know what you're asking?
Not yet.
Okay,
We're in there tomorrow.
okay. Just so keep in mind that police is looking at 4.
So, some of those questions I know that came up was looking at talking to the county, seeing if it's even viable, an option to do kind of what Council President Allgood was talking about. I think looking at just, some hard numbers. So I guess the question is, how much time does staff need to look into that? Do we want to come back?
In my spare
Kind of
time.
contingent on that,
Mhm.
be Ms. Mitchell and yourself setting a benchmark of, we're not gonna be below this much in
Yeah.
fund balance.
Mhm.
So the only time a rebate or kickback would be involved is if we're above our benchmarks.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree, and the only other thing I would add to that is, I think some sort of discussion with the auditors, and you probably are not gonna get a direct answer, but at least some sort of feel as to what that does, if that when negatively impacts it.
My auditor is going on a sabbatical for 8 weeks.
Bond rating, is that right?
That's
You
right.
want to know about bond rating, I have the audit rating and urban renewal effect
That's
on
correct.
the project,
Thank
is that
you.
right? And
That's
then,
the three items.
Counselor Allgood was setting a benchmark as to what fund balance should be.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not to open another can of worms, but the contingency fund, is that all spoken for?
The fund balance.
No,
The
I don't know what it's
contingency?
called exactly. We used to call it the rainy day
Carol likes-
fund.
Carol likes to call it a slush fund.
Yeah, the slush fund.
Oh, it's not a slush fund.
And I heard she likes
Uh,
that a lot too.
She slaps me when I say
Yeah.
that, so.
So that fund, is that all accounted for and
So that's what the fund balance is. So it can be called many different things.
That's all this
Contingency
extra
fund,
money
all
put
that. So
into
the
the-
fund
to one
balance is,
thing.
yeah, that extra money
Got
that's
it.
there
Okay.
for, emergencies, different things like that. That's been covered. So,
Okay, so that's the one where there's a recommendation made for how much to keep in there, and
Yep,
we've
and
been
that's kind of
keeping,
what Council President
quite a
Allgood, and
bit
that
more.
benchmark would be for
Mhm.
the fund balance.
right, okay.
Where we don't, if we get over that, then that tries to get to a rebate through the,
Carol,
Gotcha.
what's your submittal date to the county? To give them our first draft of
So my submittal date to you guys for the public hearing is I have to give it to Debbie by July 23rd, 4th.
sooner than that.
And then the county, once we have our public hearing and we have approved the budget, then I have to give the county the L2 by the first Thursday of September.
Oh, I thought we had something coming up in like 2 weeks.
no. So the nice thing, how we did it this year with consolidating, gives us more time to do stuff like this, to figure it out.
What we have coming up in 2 weeks is Carol needs to lock the budget so I can complete everything
That's what I
to get to Debbie's deadline. So here's my
Yeah.
challenges I have. My auditor is on a sabbatical for 8 weeks. I just got a notification from her today. So I can try and reach out to another partner in her firm and see if they will respond to me, but they don't know the Caldwell audit, but I will try. So that could be a challenge I won't have ready for you. Mayor, are you talking to the county, or I can reach out to
I
the
can
county?
reach out, yeah. I
And
can
find
reach
out how does the rebate work? A fund balance policy is not something I can just write up and have ready for you next week. It's going to be something that we will have to have a workshop on to decide what is that level that we want. Will that be accomplished in 2 weeks? No, because our next council meeting is July 7th, and I need the budget locked so that I can spend the next 2 weekends working.
So you need it locked by July 7th?
I need it, yeah, I need it locked at the end of this month.
Even if we lock
End of
all of that,
June? Sorry.
Yes, I got it. I would love to have a holiday off. I have not had a holiday off since last, September.
even if we lock it all in and it's all done, even, and you can get the information on the rebate, I think, I don't wanna speak for Councilman Allgood, but the rebate doesn't have to come tomorrow. It can be in 6 months or in the next, when we pay the next half of our taxes, if that's the direction we decide to go. Does that make sense? So we could still lock it all up, Carol could get it done, and we can make a decision on the rebate. I'm just saying it doesn't have to be done right now in this.
Right.
While we set this budget, we can always come back and say, now we're gonna give a rebate, if the answers come back that satisfies everyone.
Would next Monday be too soon to come back and meet? Do you need one more time than that, or
Okay.
27th?
What do you want me to bring back by next Monday? I will reach out to the auditor. Again, I said she's on sabbatical, so I don't know if I will have an answer from someone within her firm.
Yeah, well,
But
maybe we plan on that and then see where we're at, try to get the answers we can, and if more come up, that gives us a few more days if we needed to come back. And so, oh, you're not available on the 27th? The 28th? Would the 28th work for?
Would not work for me, I'm sorry, but
Okay. So 29th on a Wednesday, and we could start like at 5 PM, would that work? For everybody, or even,
But are we,
yeah, it would work for me.
or do you wanna do?
You and I have appointments earlier in the day.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We're done by
Yep, yeah, we'll be done by then. And then just go till whenever,
we're talking
So-
June 29th.
June 29th,
At
yep,
what time?
5 PM?
And this is just gonna be further discussion of where we're at?
Yeah. Mhm.
And writing the policy.
It won't be done in a week.
No, I mean to give the suggestions to write the policy.
Yep, and then it'll come to us in July sometime for
Sure.
final, but to just kind of think about it and see, and if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to shoot them to me or to Carol, and we can kind of run those down, and we'll just plan on June 29th, and we'll need to advertise for that, correct, that out, so. Okay. Okay, does that sound amenable to the council?
Yeah?
Hey, Mayor, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I beg your pardon.
Oh, you're good.
I shouldn't fail to mention just a couple
Good
things. One is that, we should look at, I think someone mentioned public safety money, and I wonder if that's, we probably wanna do some double checking on, fund balance that's generated from fees, like the building permit fees, just because there may be some obligations to fulfill there. I do know those guys watch us really close to make sure that we have a related purpose for the use of those funds. So that might be, I don't know if those are implicated or not in this, but if they
Yeah, no,
are,
so yeah, we'd wanna look into that, kind of see, and I think some of those have to be used in certain departments, and see if they do, how do we use that, is that offset somewhere else, so.
So
we'll
just
run all
wanna
that
make sure I
down.
didn't fail to mention that, and then, this is not a within the year kind of solution, but one thing that we could do as we identify, and frankly, it's kind of what we have tried to do, but as you identify healthy fund balance numbers, you could say, hey, if we achieve that healthy fund balance, then we don't take a fee increase, of course, right? And then, that's like a year-to-year solution. And then the other one is, hey, if we got a healthy fund balance in general fund, the council has the prerogative to say, we're not gonna take the 3%, cash increase, so just as a year-to-year thing, that could be a solution too.
Yeah, very good, thank you, appreciate it.
Do we want at that Monday, or not Monday, the 6/29 date, do we want, Urban Renewal Commissioner, Chairman, Mr. Porter there to talk about the effects on urban renewal for this reduction of projects?
If I was a betting man, I'd bet a lot of money he'll be here, no matter what,
Do we
so.
want him to come prepared to identify his priority projects?
Do we, Mr. Porter? Mhm. Okay, so we'll kind of leave that up to you if you want. I don't think we'd be
Well,
opposed to.
We can get the list of projects though, and both, Councilman Allgood and I are on urban renewal, so we can.
Yeah, and even
not
sending
put
them,
in order without the whole body, but we could show you all what the projects
yeah,
are.
so, okay. sounds good.
Maybe that guy has a solution, 'cause he's pretty smart, even though he's not paying attention to me right now. He always seems to have an answer for
Very
something.
good. Okay, anything else, any other direction? Like I said, and you're more than welcome to reach out between now and then if something pops up, like, oh, what about this? And we can run that down, and we'll plan on advertising for next, Wednesday, the 29th. A begin time of 5 p.m. and jump into it and see where we can go. So, but I appreciate everybody's attention tonight. I know we went over a lot of things, and this is, like I said, all great discussion. So, like I said, not tied to anything, just trying to figure it out, and appreciate everyone's willingness to talk and be cooperative. So we will end this workshop and meet again next week.